3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of April.
Could he go? Humza Yousaf's future hangs by a thread. Today he's cancelled one major speech, and now Scottish Labour has lodged a motion of no confidence in not just him, but in his whole government. Could he resign this afternoon?
Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister has blamed the Rwanda deportation scheme for an influx of migrants from the UK into his country. Tory MPs say this shows the deterrent is already working, but is he simply trying to deflect from his own government's failures?
And a secret review highlights dangerous vulnerabilities in our universities. Academics could soon be vetted by the MI5 under government plans to tackle Chinese spies. This comes as two men accused of spying for China have been released on bail. We'll speak to Ian Duncan-Smith.
And should life in prison mean life? A teenage murderer who tortured her grandmother before dumping her body in a canal is back on the streets. We'll have that debate. And we've brought out the lettuce.
Ah, yes, we have.
Here he is, Humza Yousaf. The question is, will the Scottish First Minister last longer than our friend here, than our leafy, lettucey friend?
Has his career hit an iceberg, lettuce?
I don't know the average lifetime of a lettuce after you pick it off the shelf. I mean, is it a week? Is it a bit less than a week?
Well, it outlasted Liz Truss, did it not? So that must have been at least,
certainly did.
What is it, 49 days?
Well, no, but that was always not quite true, though, because the Daily Star only got out the lettuce a good way into her premiership. So it didn't really outlast. Anyway, we're getting into specifics
so pedantic.
Yeah,
so
but
pedantic.
The question is, from this point on, I'd say this lettuce will sort of be able to live pretty happily, maybe for the next week, before it starts getting really, really grim and we sort of want to get it out of the office.
Will
Humza Yousaf last that long?
Yeah, will he last that long? We should say that Humza Yousaf is going to be giving a speech. We don't know what he's going to say. Maybe he'll come out strongly, saying he can continue to run Scotland with a minority government, but it does seem like everything's crumbling around him, doesn't it?
The first lesson in politics is learn to count. 64 members of the Scottish Parliament currently are saying he should go. 63 currently say he should stay. And one hasn't made her mind up yet.
Yes, if I was a betting woman, I probably wouldn't put much on him lasting very long. But we shall see what he's got to say this afternoon. But yes, will he leaf or remain?
Very good, very good. Well, gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved, or indeed to just tell me off for being quite so silly with arts and crafts this morning.
Please do. Teach him a lesson. Teach him a lesson. Should we get your headlines?
Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 12. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Scotland's First Minister has cancelled a planned speech on independence as he faces a leadership contest next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. The Greens are said to have been angered by Scotland's NHS pausing puberty blockers for those under 18 and the abandonment of the country's emissions target. A vote against Mr Yousaf wouldn't automatically end his term as First Minister, but it would throw doubt over his ability to govern. A former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for China. Christopher Cash, who's 29, and 32-year-old Christopher Berry are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yian Both, who's 22 and from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Yuma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man was bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction is an institutional betrayal. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer helped spark the Me Too movement. A major film star in the 1990s, she sued Weinstein in 2018, claiming he damaged her career after she rejected his advances. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday after a New York court ruled that he didn't receive a fair trial. The district attorney will now determine whether to seek a retrial, though he remains in prison for other crimes. Ashley Judd says the courts haven't served the needs of victims.
This today is an act of institutional betrayal. And our institutions betray survivors of male sexual violence. I stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have bloody knees. Because male sexual violence may knock us down, but we get right back up. And together we are in this struggle for freedom from male entitlement to our bodies.
The world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer has begun testing on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and prevent the deadly disease from coming back, and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was the first person to take part in the groundbreaking clinical trial.
I had any fear because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
Labour says that any benefits from recent changes to tax have been wiped out by rising inflation. The party's analysis shows costs for working households are nearly £8,000 higher each year. The government says its economic plan is working and inflation is coming down. It comes as the Shadow Chancellor has warned Rishi Sunak to scrap what she calls his unfunded £46 billion commitment to abolish national insurance contributions. Rachel Reeves said she would never make a spending commitment without saying where the money is coming from.
I've been very clear that I want taxes on working people to be lower. During the course of this Parliament and the plans that the government have got in place, the average family is going to be £870 worse off just because of tax increases by the end of the forecast period. But you also know that I'm never going to make any promise where I can't say where the money is going to come from. That's what the Conservatives did in the mini-budget. In fact, that is also what Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt did in their budget just a few weeks ago.
And MI5 is warning foreign states are targeting UK universities to undermine national security. Vice-chancellors from 24 leading universities have been alerted to the threat. The government and security services are worried that cutting-edge research could be targeted by foreign states to boost their own militaries and economies. The Deputy Prime Minister has announced a consultation on measures to protect Britain's universities. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, can the First Minister of Scotland hang on?
Yes, his future is pretty much hanging by a thread after the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens collapsed yesterday.
Well, following the Scottish Conservatives' decision to lodge a motion of no confidence in the First Minister, Scottish Labour have now upped the ante by tabling a new no-confidence motion in the entire Scottish Government.
Yeah, so it's not just him now. The entire Scottish Government. Interesting. The news came as Humza Yousaf abruptly cancelled a planned speech at Strathclyde University as speculation intensifies about whether he will remain in his post.
Well, let's go to Edinburgh now and speak to GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Because, Tony, this has been an accelerating story. Clearly frantic conversations going on behind the scenes today. But we're expecting to hear from Humza Yousaf a little bit later.
Yeah, that's correct, Tom. Certainly, Humza Yousaf was expected to be speaking at Strathclyde University today on the merits of the labour force in an independent Scotland. That, of course, was scrapped, give or take, around 9 o'clock this morning, right after Westminster SNP leader Stephen Flynn said that Humza Yousaf would come out swinging. Well, coming out swinging, he's going to have another opportunity to do that in around an hour or so from now. He's going to be speaking at a social housing development in his native Dundee, and it's expected that we'll perhaps hear a bit more when the press finally get to ask their questions of him then. Quite a whirlwind of an occasion, really, not just up here, but I think it's safe to say felt right around the country. Humza Yousaf went into that extraordinary cabinet meeting yesterday morning fully expecting to come out feeling this was going to be a move of strength for the SNP, to move away from those those progressive green policies which have sown something of a rift within his own party. I think if we look at Tuesday in Parliament, there was a vote on the new Justice Act and how they were looking at that. Now, that Justice Act, believe it or not, passed with, or that motion passed with 60 votes, but there was also 62 abstentions. And I think the feeling from Humza Yousaf was definitely, well, if the Greens were part of the Butte House Agreement, part of this government in order to provide stability in terms of voting, then, you know, he would much rather have his own MSPs. Now, of course, this vote of no confidence, let's talk about the first one. We've got Douglas Ross's vote of no confidence in Humza Yousaf. It certainly seems like even if Ash Regan is to vote on side with Humza Yousaf and the SNP, then certainly the final vote will fall on Alison Johnson. She's the presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament and a former Green MSP. Now, voting convention states that she would probably vote with the government, but certainly that would also mean against her old former party. But now almost superseding that is Scottish Labour's vote of no confidence in the government. That supersedes it because if the SNP government lose that vote, then they're legally bound to basically dissolve Parliament and dissolve government, and we would be heading towards a Scottish election. Can you believe that that might happen before the next Westminster election?
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire, our Scotland reporter there in Edinburgh. We're now joined by freelance columnist Alistair Stewart for some further analysis. Alistair, thank you very much indeed for joining us. How much trouble is Humza Yousaf in, and do you think he'll last the day?
I think he'll last the day, but I think he is in more trouble than perhaps even he knows that he is. Yesterday, it feels a whirlwind ago now, but he started that day thinking he was in a powerful position and reasserting his authority by chucking the Scottish Greens out of his own government. Now, they are 2 ministers, but it seems that the SNP is now very much collapsing under the weight of 17 years of distraction and policies that are now coming back to haunt them. There is only so much damage that the Greens leaving government could do. Clearly, the pile-on that's taking place, led by the Scottish Conservatives and now the Scottish Labour Party, is double downing on blood in the water. And as anyone will tell you, that once blood is in the water, it's very hard to get it out. So even if Mr Youssef survives the no confidence vote in him as First Minister, there's now a vote of no confidence in his government. And that's going to be incredibly hard to shake, even if he managed to scrape through, hypothetically, both of those challenges to his authority.
As a former Prime Minister once said, when the herd moves, it moves. It certainly feels like the herd is moving in Holyrood today. But we're expecting these 2 no-confidence motions, one, as Tony explained, in Humza Yousaf as First Minister, and one in the Scottish Government as a whole. Frankly, Humza Yousaf has got to do some dealing with someone that he once seemed pretty glad to be rid of from his party, the former leadership contender, Ash Regan.
There's a great deal of irony associated with this situation, twofold in fact. One is that Ash Regan is now a member of the Alba party, which is led by Alex Salmond, which Mr Youssef has been extremely critical of in recent months and years. And now Miss Regan finds herself in the position where she actually needs to cast what is effectively one of the final votes on it. Now, she was laughed out of the leadership election that Mr Youssef subsequently won. She's not been taken seriously since, and now she finds herself very much as a kingmaker for his entire future in politics. Irony does occasionally come about, but this is a particularly hurtful bout of karma for anyone in the SNP who is laughing at Alex Salmond and laughing at Ash Regan and not taking their chances of a comeback seriously, because they are very much now here and they have something to say.
And if Humza Yousaf does resign, if he's forced out with these no-confidence votes, who's there to replace him? Oh, we are joined now by Catherine Forster. Oh, no, we're not. I'm asking, essentially, what happens next? Is Alistair still with us? I'm hoping he is. Alistair, what happens next? Who's in the running, potentially, to take over the top job there?
Truth be told, at this stage, I think it's impossible to speculate on, but I think the people who most need to reflect on that question are the SNP themselves. Speaking with friends in the party, speaking with associates in the party, you do get a feeling that they've never quite comfortably sat with Mr Youssef over the last year. So I have a sneaking suspicion that a few of them already have in the back of their minds candidates to put forward. This inevitably was going to happen. He's never cemented his position, certainly not as stronger as his 2 predecessors. But the parties itself has a lot of soul searching to do. The candidate that does come forward is someone who is ultimately going to have to work with opposition parties in a way that's not happened recently. Independence is unlikely to overtake serious policy issues in Scottish politics again for a long time. So you need a serious candidate to come forward with serious solutions who's happy to work with opposition parties.
It was a surprise, I think, to many people that Humza Yousaf didn't win the leadership election by the degree by which people were expecting he would win a year ago. It was much, much closer than people would have thought against Kate Forbes, someone who was painted in the media as a sort of Christian extremist. But I wonder if actually none of those candidates will now be the people sort of leading the SNP forward. The name that seems to be doing the rounds is Neil Gray, someone from much more sort of central casting of the SNP, perhaps quite a boring man, but maybe someone who can keep this fractious ship together.
I think there's definitely an argument to be made there that someone who's worked on the back benches, perhaps someone who's been strong within committees in the Scottish Parliament, is the stable pair of hands that you need to guide the ship as it goes forward, certainly if the party hopes to survive until the next Scottish election. Kate Forbes was a very interesting candidate at the last SNP leadership election, certainly because she was put forward as someone who was economically literate, who was competent, and had less of a focus. It was still on her agenda, of course, but less of a focus on independence. If you listen to her speak then, her emphasis was much more on solving problems within Scottish public life. Whoever comes forward, if someone has to come forward, is going to have to be someone who's prepared to put those policy priorities front and centre and independence second.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Alistair Stewart, freelance columnist. Great to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
I remember the leadership contest. Kate Foss was unfairly maligned, was she not?
Well, she's a Christian.
Over Christian views, and they were very normal Christian views. It seems, though, that she's sort of backing...
mainstream of I don't think they were the most normal.
What did she say that was so extreme?
She took a view on abortion that I think most Christians in the UK wouldn't take. The particular church she was a member of is seen as being a bit more hard-line than many churches that people are members of in the UK in general. I think she wasn't bang slap in the middle of bog standard Christian theology. I think she was perhaps a little bit more evangelical than many people might be.
Well, interestingly, she seems to be backing Kumzi Yusuf through all this turmoil, which is very interesting indeed. But shall we move on to something else?
Sneak peek of this already on the programme. Yeah. It's none other than Catherine Forster, who will be joining us to say, is the Rwanda bill already working? Now, that's a bit of a curious question, but with the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda being legalised or becoming an act rather than a bill earlier this week, Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland is now claiming that actually it's Rwanda is this legislation's fault that so many people are coming to Ireland. Very odd.
Yes, of course, this comes against a backdrop of increasing tension. We've seen riots, we've seen arson attacks in Ireland, all over rising immigration, housing shortages, all sorts of things kicking off in Ireland. But joining us now is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. This is quite an interesting row, isn't it, Catherine? The Irish Deputy Prime Minister essentially saying people are so fearful of this Rwanda deportation plan that they're flooding into Ireland. Is there truth to this?
Well, yes, there is apparently, because Michael Martin, the Deputy Irish Prime Minister, has been saying that 80% of people seeking asylum coming into Ireland now are in fact coming from Northern Ireland. So they've come in across the channel, presumably on small boats. Lots of people still come in on lorries as well, of course. And then, of course, because there is effectively no border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, of course, still in the EU, they are free to cross the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, into Ireland, from which, of course, they cannot then be deported from Rwanda. So, yes, he is saying that the Rwanda bill that only passed into law in the early hours of Tuesday morning, only got royal assent, voted through in the early hours of Tuesday morning, only passed into law yesterday with royal assent, is already having an effect. He said it's already impacting on Ireland because people are fearful of staying in the United Kingdom. So this is clearly bad news for Ireland. It's already got plenty of its own problems, as you've mentioned, but good news for the government. Now, of course, the government ultimately wants the Rwanda plan to work as a deterrent to stop people crossing the channel full stop. Rishi Sunak pledged to stop the boats. No evidence of that at the moment. Of course, the numbers are up this year on where they were a year ago, and we had those tragic deaths. 5 people died in the channel on Tuesday morning. But the government is saying that they're going to get, Rishi Sunak has said, a regular drumbeat of flights taking off to Rwanda throughout the summer. I was with the Prime Minister on his trip to Poland and to Germany this week. He was talking to us. He was very upbeat indeed. They've had a good week, number 10, this week. They've had plenty of terrible weeks. Mark Menzies, William Ragg, all sorts of scandals. But this week, the announcement on defence spending, getting the Rwanda plan into law, and then last week's big announcements on welfare. They feel that they are back on the front foot. So, you know, we've waited 2 years since this plan was announced to see people on flights to Rwanda. It hasn't happened yet, but the government is confident that we don't have too much longer to wait.
Thank you very much indeed. Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, live in Westminster. I do wonder if the Deputy Prime Minister and the Irish leadership are simply trying to deflect from their failures. They have been for a while very liberal about immigration, very progressive in the way that they view asylum seekers and the like, but the Irish public in large part, are pretty furious. There's a bit of a tinderbox in parts of Ireland. Let's not, it's hard to overstate, really, how much so.
Pretty hard to argue that there's been loads of immigration from the UK to Ireland in the last few months because of Rwanda. Meanwhile, the number of people come across on boats seems higher this year than it was last year, despite Rwanda. Those two things don't quite work. I think, yeah, Michael Martin might be trying to stretch the truth there.
Yes, indeed. Well, there is still time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies, and a £10,000 tax-free cashbank balance boost. Here's all the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, there you go. That's how you can win that prize. Sounds fantastic to me.
It sounds fantastic for me. I need to get up. You've just been away for a week. You've been enjoying the sun.
Actually, yes, I don't need it, but I'm not allowed to apply either. So there you go. You can, though, at home, so please do. We're going to be talking about Chinese spies. There's a new review that's highlighting our dangerous vulnerabilities in our universities. We'll be speaking to Ian Duncan-Smith. Stay tuned.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
But first, to a story that makes me very, very proud. The largest cross of St George in the entire country has been unfurled in my home city of Nottingham. Look at it. Now, we all know how so many people have tried to cancel England's national flag, so this is a great thing to see. 6 days before St George's Day, well, we've been out and about in Nottingham to get the views of the locals.
I think it's really good to see it up there. It's good to see a celebration of England, the country. I think there's a lot of times now we don't celebrate, and it's good to see.
I think it's pretty good, actually. It looks pretty good. Yeah. Nice to support the local saint, so to speak.
I think it's amazing. I do. I think it's absolutely amazing, and it's proud for something in our country.
Oh, yeah, proud to be English, of course.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah.
Does it make you feel proud to be English?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Get in. Well, let's cross live now to Old Market Square and speak to Natalie Fay, who's the editor of Nottingham Live. Natalie, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have you on. I know the Old Market Square, my old stomping ground, that council house. Brian Clough lifted 2 European Cups on that balcony behind us there. That council house, Natalie, normally has flags for pride, for trans awareness, for inclusivity, for Black History Month, for disability. But this, when this flag came out today, the first reaction I had, Natalie, was, is it real? It's behind you. Is it real?
It's 60 foot by 26 foot, which is absolutely huge. This goes up every single year without fail. In fact, this year, it's going up for an even longer period than it was last year. I think it's just great the Nottingham City Council is celebrating everything, because we should celebrate everything. We've got a great diverse city, pride, forests, panthers, whatever it is. And the council house is a great place to display all those things. Everyone sees it, it's iconic.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 12:27. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, academics could soon be vetted by the MI5 under government plans to tackle Chinese spies.
Well, this comes as the security service warns sensitive research at British universities is being targeted by hostile foreign states.
And this comes as two former parliamentary researchers accused of spying for China have now been released on bail.
Well, it's a concerning security picture, but let's get abreast of it now with the Conservative Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Sir Ian, thank you for making the time for us. Where to start with all of this? It seems that China is becoming more assertive, more aggressive and wider-reaching in its espionage operations.
Yeah, that's been apparent for some time. I'm one of 7 members of parliament, that's Lords and MPs, who are sanctioned by the Chinese government directly, which includes our families as well. And that's all because we've been part of an organization called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, and we've called them to account on a whole series of issues that they've been doing, such as genocide in China. They've broken all the trade rules. And they spy the whole time on us. And universities are very, very heavily loaded into Chinese dependency, and they are very vulnerable at the moment.
And we have to tread carefully, of course, because this is an ongoing live case, but there have been these 2 men. They're now out on bail, but they've been accused of spying for China. Is this a very real problem that people inside of our institutions, acting in Parliament, in our universities, are not necessarily Chinese themselves, but they're spying on behalf of China?
It's a mix of both. There are definitely people who are Chinese passport holders who have been in the UK and have been spying, no question about that. There have been cases of postgrad students being involved in defence contracts. So our vetting of many people have been very poor indeed. But there's also what I always call the fellow travellers, those people that have been out to China and have become imbued with the idea that China is right, and they rather like the idea of intolerant regimes like the Chinese who tell people what to do, and if they don't do what they do, then they get arrested and dealt with. And this sort of communities are sometimes quite inviting to those who've been out there studying. So there are 1 or 2 of those around. There are 2 people that are accused now of spying. One who was working for an organization called the Chinese Research Group, which is a very small group of people, includes the existing chairman of the Foreign Secretary, the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And then there's another individual I've never heard of who has turned up to have been spying as well. That's what the accusation is. So they wouldn't be making those accusations if they weren't very certain that they had the right element of data. This is a war going on. It's a cyber war. And China is spending its time attacking and trying to find ways through our systems throughout all of the Western world, what I call the free world, those who believe in democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. So, and the important thing that people should understand is that China isn't alone in this. There's what I call a new axis of totalitarian states, the heart of which is China, the second most powerful economic nation on the planet, and probably the second most powerful military country after the United States. And it includes North Korea, Russia, and Iran, very carefully involving and coordinating their actions at the moment. So it is a very threatening affair, and it's going to get worse.
It's a stark warning there, Sir Ian. I suppose we should say at this point, those that have been accused have not been proven to have done anything wrong. Being accused doesn't necessarily, of course, mean that there is guilt implied there. But Sir Ian, this feels like a new Cold War in many ways. I sort of read about the spies that existed in the 1960s and 70s at Cambridge University, read about sort of how, in many ways, it's usually the sort of intelligentsia that gets involved in this sort of network of espionage. Are we seeing a mirror image of what the Soviet Union was sort of spreading out in this country half a century ago, now with China today?
Yeah, in some cases, I think this is even worse. Remember, the Soviet Union was deemed as a military superpower, but it ran its military on the back of an economy probably smaller than New York State. It was tiny, and they spent huge proportions of their income on defense. I mean, I always say to people, can you remember a single thing that you ever bought that had the label on it, made in the Soviet Union? And the answer was no, because if you did weren't so stupid to have bought it, it would have broken down and it wouldn't work. It's different now. China has become incredibly wealthy on the back of Western companies running to China to do their business with them because they were able to get cheaper deals, cheaper labor costs. Now, all of that has made China an absolute economic superpower, and we are dependent now on China for so many things. You don't even realize how many things are made. I mean, I was having an argument with Amazon the other day because they don't tell you where things are made, and they should do. So all of this, I'm afraid, is part of the undermining of the resolve of the free world. And if you look right now, everything, all the way, the links between them and Iran, what Iran's doing in the UK with the IRGC, the getting people in different Muslim communities to be much more angry about life and about everything else.
Absolutely. So, Ian, I'm terribly sorry. We're going to have to leave it there, but it's been fantastic to talk to you, and I'd love to hear more about your battle with Amazon as well. Really great to speak to you. So Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative MP for Chingford and Woodford Green. Lots to say on that, but coming up, is our asylum system broken? We're discussing this. This is related to the case of a Moroccan asylum seeker who brutally murdered a pensioner. But first, your afternoon headlines.
It's 12:34. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. First, to some news just in, a 20-year-old man has been charged with conducting hostile activity in the UK to benefit Russia. Dylan Earle is accused of masterminding an arson plot on London businesses after allegedly being recruited as a Russian spy. 4 other men were also charged in connection with the same investigation. We'll bring you more information as we get it. To other news now, Scotland's First Minister is due to speak soon ahead of a crucial test of his leadership contest next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says it's time for a fresh start in Scotland.
We will back the motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf, but we've gone further and tabled a motion of no confidence in the whole Scottish Government. And if Anna Sawar and Scottish Labour are successful with that amendment, the government will fall and there'll be fresh elections. And it is time for a fresh start in Scotland. The chaos and division at the heart of the SNP is having a real impact on public services and the lives of communities across Scotland. And we now have 2 broken governments, the SNP in Scotland and the Conservatives in Westminster. It is time for fresh elections in Scotland and across the UK.
And 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding in Antrim on the A2 along Shore Road at Whiteabbey. It's down to a single lane each way after an accident causing delays in North Yorkshire. The A64 is partly blocked by an accident at Stockton on the Forest, with delays there too. Now, in Flintshire, the A548 is closed each way between Sealand and Chester after an accident. In Hertfordshire, the A10 is partly blocked southbound by an accident just before the A121 at Waltham Cross, causing queues. In Essex, the A176 is blocked southbound where a car's overturned on Upper Main in Basildon, with delays on all approaches to the roundabout there. There are delays of up to half an hour to trains between Stevenage and Finsbury Park because of a points failure. On the M2 in Kent, there's a lane closed eastbound when someone's broken down between junctions 5 and 6 from Sittingbourne to Faversham. And in Somerset, there's a report of an accident on the A303 at Martock. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations. Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where we need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at, actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 20 to 1. Now, is our broken asylum system putting British lives at risk?
The Moroccan-born killer, Ahmed Alid, was allowed to stay in the UK after being arrested and having his application rejected in Italy and Germany. He travelled around 13 different European countries before ending up here. Now, yesterday, he was found guilty of murdering 70-year-old Terence Carney after being inspired, apparently, to take revenge for the Israel-Hamas conflict. How on earth was he in this country and allowed to stay here?
Well, joining us now is immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, thank you for joining us. This is just the most extraordinary case, but I suppose it speaks to, more than anything else, just how slow our system is here in the UK.
Yes, absolutely. So there's serious questions raised by the delay in deciding Alid's asylum application. That's the first thing. And secondly, you might want to know what's going to happen to Alid. How will the public be protected when he's released? I think that's an important issue, because this individual should not be in this country. He should be deported and removed to protect the public. He's a dangerous person, and the public needs to be protected and be assured.
But Ivan, we do see, I take your point completely about the slow processes of the Home Office, but time and time again, we see foreign criminals being allowed to stay in this country because of their human rights. What rights will this man have if he does serve a sentence in this country, finishes it, then what? What rights will he have? Will he be able to make a claim that he should be able to stay in this country?
No, he can't. And the law was changed back in April last year And essentially, there's two exceptions to the rule that he'll be automatically deported. One is that he has strong links to the UK. And you have to have a lawful residence and be resident here for most of your life, first of all. And there'll be very difficult for him to reintegrate back in his home country. So those are the two. The other exception is if he's in a relationship with someone settled here, who has a child here, and it will be unduly harsh for them to relocate back to the
Ivan, why would
I haven't finished.
Okay, go on, finish.
It doesn't apply to him.
Yeah.
It won't. None of that will apply to him because he's been sentenced to more than 4 years. So those exceptions will not apply to him. He will be deported. And quite rightly, the Secretary of State will make that deportation order.
I wonder, this question of not being able to reintegrate in your own country, that's curious. Why should the British public or the British Home Office care about that necessarily?
Well, I'll tell you why. Look, I did a case where someone had been living here for 40 years, had never, he'd come in as a baby, had indefinite leave to remain, but never got a British passport. So he'd committed an offence, did his time, was rehabilitated, came back out again, got British wife and children. See, Article 8 is decided on its individual facts. But what the law says, the more serious the crime, that's more than 4 years, the balance shifts in favour of the state to protect the public. So those really serious crimes, it's quite right that the public should be protected. But the less serious crimes, especially ones that not concern offences against persons, the violent crimes, it's a balancing exercise. So someone who's lived there, let's say 99% of their life in the UK and have a family here, is it right to deport them? I'm not sure about that.
But in this case, there should be no hiccups. It should go fairly smoothly, and he should be shown the door after his sentence. Well, let's hope that
he'll have the right to appeal, though, won't he, Ivan? He'll have a right to appeal.
As I said, he can challenge it. He has a right under Article 8, but it will fail because the exceptions don't apply to him.
Okay.
He's going to get sentenced for more than 4 years for murder. It's a statutory life imprisonment. So I'm afraid those exceptions will not apply. And that's quite right. And you see, over the last 10 years, the law's been in flux. Various case laws, and you've heard about people avoiding deportation for the most, strange reasons. But now the Home Office, in April last year, through a statement of change, have clarified all of that, simplified it. And so it's much easier for the courts to interpret what the law is.
That's very good news. Well, Ivan Sampson, thank you for joining us and talking through that case. Really, really interesting stuff. And interesting that it's now all been clarified.
Let's hope so.
If only that had happened, quite a bit earlier than just last April.
I don't know, but how many deportation flights get stopped on the tarmac? Anyway, is having children going out of fashion? The MP, Miriam Case, warns that it is, says it could become culturally unusual for couples to have children. We'll speak to her next.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. After a bright start, it will cloud over for most of us, and it's going to be another cool feeling day. And we will start to see a few showers breaking out, particularly across southwestern England, where this low pressure system is introducing some weather fronts. That's going to introduce a risk of some very heavy showers through this afternoon across many areas of Devon and Cornwall, then into parts of Dorset later on. Further north, for many areas of northern parts of the UK, it will turn cloudier through this afternoon, and then there's a risk of a few showers. But I think most areas should stay dry, and in the sunshine, it won't feel too bad. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, still a little bit below average, but still quite cool underneath the thicker cloud across parts of the Midlands and for much of South Wales as well. It'll stay cloudy across southern areas throughout tonight, but in the north, it will turn much drier and clearer through tonight. So it's going to be another cold and crisp start to Saturday across the north, but in the south, cloud will continue to build and those heavy showers will continue their journey northwards through this evening. So parts of South Wales into the Midlands could see some of that heavy rain by the start of the weekend. And across the south, it's going to stay quite cloudy cloudy throughout Saturday with those showery outbreaks of rain continuing. Might turn a little bit brighter across the south coast by lunchtime, but then those sunny spells will introduce a further risk of some heavy, possibly thundery downpours. Across northern areas, though, after a bright start, cloud will thicken once again with a risk of a few showers, but it won't feel too bad at all in the sunshine.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 minutes to 1. Now, a few months ago, Conservative MP Miriam Cates spoke to demographists at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship about what she called the elephant in the room when it comes to Britain's economic prospects.
Yes, and in the discussion published in a podcast this week, Miriam Cates, who is known for speaking out on issues related to children and families, claimed that the decline in childbirth rates could lead to economic stagnation, as regardless of whether you stand on the left or the right, a good workforce is needed for a strong economy.
Well, Britain's fertility rate is just half of what it was 60 years ago. And with immigration at record levels now, should the British public be making more of an effort to have more babies? Making more of an effort.
That's a funny question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're joined now by Miriam Cates herself. Miriam, I like the way we put that, it made me laugh. Miriam, it's very sad, actually, because I've heard you speak about this issue quite a lot, and you've said in this podcast, that now a podcast, saying that it could become culturally unusual for couples to have babies. And there are a lot of women out there who desperately want babies, but they can't have them for whatever reason.
I think we are waking up to the fact that this is a problem. And of course, I should absolutely say at the outset, some people don't want to have children. That's absolutely legitimate. It's always been the case. Nobody, least of all me, has got any interest in trying to encourage people who don't want to have children. That's not necessary at all. But what the polling suggests is that the vast, vast majority of young women do want to have children, 92% in fact. And on average, they want 2.3 children, so 2 or 3 children in other words. But sadly, we know that up to about 30% of the current cohort of young women, so 18 to 35-year-olds, probably won't end up with children. Now, that's a serious social problem. That's a lot of young women, and obviously men as well, of course, ending up childless when actually they always planned to have children. That is a big source of grief for many people, and that's why we should be trying hard to fix the barriers. But also, it's a serious economic problem, because I think we have been told for so long the world is overpopulated, there are too many people, it's causing climate change, etc. Now, that's not to say there aren't problems with fast-growing populations. There can be. But actually, it's the opposite of that that's happening now. And when I was born, there was about 4 working-age people to every pensioner in this country. So 4 people working, paying taxes, doing jobs to support one person who's retired. It's now 3 to 1. and by the end of my life, it will be 2 to 1. Now, you think of the impact that has on the amount of tax that people have to pay, the amount of care work that needs to be done. It's economically unsustainable. And that's why so many Western economies, including ours, are now creaking at the seams with healthcare bills and social care work and tax bills that they're almost unable to pay because the demographics are kind of upside down. So this is a serious problem, both socially but also economically.
There's such a stark statistic, moving from 4 working age people to a pensioner to 2. I mean, just simple maths there. You'd have to double taxes just to keep pensions level. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Exactly, and this is why both left and right get hung up with the kind of ideology of tax rates. You know, the left want more spending, the right want lower taxes, but you can neither have lower taxes or more spending if you don't have enough young people coming into the workforce to work and pay tax. That's just basic maths. It's not ideology, it's not politics, and I think that's what we've got to realise and start talking about.
And Miriam, do we know the breakdown of this? Because obviously not all women are the same. Which types of women, if I can say that, are not having children? Is it university-educated women who have gone on to careers and they may leave it a little too late? Is it people living in cities? Do we have a breakdown?
I think there's quite a lot of different strands to this, and it's actually really interesting to look at how the data kind of adds up. So the headline figures are that you need 2.1 babies per woman to have this stable demographic where you have enough people coming into the workforce to replace those who are leaving it. And we're now down to about 1.5 babies per woman. But it's not as simple as that. What's happening is that women who do become mothers tend to have the same number of children as they might have done in the 70s, so 2, 3, or maybe 4 children. What has changed is a number of women who never become mothers at all. And I think there are a number of factors in that. Firstly, people are leaving it later. That's partly a function of education. It's definitely a function of house prices. People seem to finding it harder to find partners in cities. So that seems to be a big factor, because obviously if you do leave it later, sadly, there is a greater chance that you won't be successful in becoming pregnant. So that's definitely one factor. But there are a whole load of other issues. And that's why I think culture is quite important here as well, because of course, having a child is partly dependent on finding a partner, having enough money. But also you look at what other people are doing too, don't you? And you're unlikely to want to have a child if there's nobody else in your community with a baby, no parent and baby groups, no safe place to take your child to play. And I think it's partly a cultural thing that the fewer children we have, the fewer children people will want to have. And that is something that government can surely get.
Absolutely. Well, Miriam Cates, thank you very much for joining us. I think we've just cut out at the end there, but we got all of that interview there.
It's
so
terribly
really
sad, isn't it? Lots of women wanting to have children, either not meeting the right partner, not being able to afford it, pursuing their career, and not thinking about it until it's too late, and the difficulties of the costs, of course.
One of the harshest things, I think, that came to light this week, The Economist did a piece on it, the size of houses in the UK compared to France or America or even the Netherlands. The size of houses is small. People don't have a spare room. Are you gonna have a child if they have to live in your one-room flat with you? I mean,
but then some people would say maybe young people these days aren't willing to make the sacrifices necessary. That's another school of thought. But anyway, still to come, Homes Use's future hanging in the balance. Got a little lettuce man waiting here, do we?
Will he outlast Hamza Yousleaf? That's
Good afternoon, Britain on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. After a bright start, it will cloud over for most of us, and it's going to be another cool feeling day. And we will start to see a few showers breaking out, particularly across southwestern England, where this low pressure system is introducing some weather fronts. That's going to introduce a risk of some very heavy showers through this afternoon across many areas of Devon and Cornwall, then into parts of Dorset later on. Further north, for many areas of northern parts of the UK, it will turn cloudier through this afternoon, and then there's a risk of a few showers. But I think most areas should stay dry, and in the sunshine, it won't feel too bad. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, still a little bit below average, but still quite cool underneath the thicker cloud across parts of the Midlands and for much of South Wales as well. It'll stay cloudy across southern areas throughout tonight, but in the north it will turn much drier and clearer through tonight. So it's going to be another cold and crisp start to Saturday across the north. But in the south, cloud will continue to build and those heavy showers will continue their journey northwards through this evening. So parts of South Wales into the Midlands could see some of that heavy rain by the start of the weekend. And across the south, it's going to stay quite cloudy throughout Saturday with those showery outbreaks of rain continuing. It might turn a little bit brighter across the south coast by lunchtime, but then those sunny spells will introduce a further risk of some heavy, possibly thundery downpours. Across northern areas, though, after a bright start, cloud will thicken once again with a risk of a few showers, but it won't feel too bad at all in the sunshine.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
OK, now we've just been talking about smoking and the long-term effects that smoking can have, but things like obesity can have short-term serious health effects on very young people. Has there been any analysis of these 3 million as to how many would be described as being clinically obese?
The data doesn't break down by weight. I would strongly suspect, and certainly there has been analysis of the interaction between obesity, the labour market, that shows that yes, it is a profound challenge within the economy. So I would suspect that there's something there that is at play. And I think that raises an incredibly valid point that we have objectively failed to get a grip on obesity in the last 20, 30, 40 years. It's remarkable to me that the obesity rate amongst children in the 1970s and 1980s, it was about 2%. Today, we have about a fifth of children entering primary school with obesity. I don't think that's a sudden moral failure of those people. I think that's down to the fact that the food on our shelves has got significantly more unhealthy, and we haven't really intervened against that.
I want to hear from you one big idea of what we can do to try and improve this.
I think we need to finally get some long-term aspiration into this. So we have a net zero for climate. That's a 30-year mission that every government department, every business, every individual has a role to play in bringing down. We know what the contributions are. I'd like there to be a net zero for health. What is the 30-year aspiration for health to make us the healthiest country in the world? And from that, what can every government department, every business, every individual, every community contribute to doing that? Because ultimately, I don't think there's a path to having a strong economy without sorting out the UK's quite dire population health. We are the literal sick man of Europe as it stands.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Friday, the 26th of April.
Could he go? Humza Yousaf's future hangs by a thread. Today, he's cancelled a major speech, and now Scottish Labour has lodged a motion of no confidence in not just him, but his whole government. We're expecting some words from Humza Yousaf this afternoon. Could he resign?
And should life in prison actually mean life? A teenage murderer who tortured her grandmother before dumping her body in a canal is back on the streets. We'll have the debate.
Is our asylum system working? Morocco-born killer Ahmed Alid was allowed to stay in the UK after being arrested and having his application rejected in Italy and Germany. Yesterday, he was found guilty of murdering 70-year-old Terence Carney. Now, we are expecting Humza Yousaf to say something today. One speech was cancelled, but there's all rumours swirling about some words, something that he might say, and it's got a lot of people guessing.
It has got a lot of people guessing and wondering whether he's going to come out swinging, saying he's the leader for Scotland, saying, of course, he can work towards independence for Scotland. No worries about the fact he's now got a minority government. If only everyone will work with him, get on board with his agenda, it would all be all right. Or will he buckle under the pressure and perhaps resign?
Could he last for a lesser amount of time than our dear friend Humza Yousaf will be green for? Will Humza Yousaf be fresh for longer than Humza Yousaf? It's got a little. It's starting to go off a little bit actually already, which I'm surprised.
You bought a cheapo lettuce, didn't you?
I bought a lettuce this morning, and now he's already going off. I mean,
we won't say where he got it from. Of course, you can get your lettuces from wherever you fancy.
All good supermarkets.
From all good supermarkets. But this is the question of the day, really. Will Humza Yousaf last the day? Will he be gone very shortly indeed? Or will he struggle on? Will he be able to spin this all in his favour?
And is it really in his gift? Could Ash Regan be the person who actually becomes perhaps the most powerful woman in Scotland? 2 no-confidence votes to take place next week, but might it all collapse before then? gbnews.com/your say. We'll be across it all. We'll be north of the border, and we'll be looking out for those words from Humza Yousaf, all after your latest headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 1. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour: Scotland's First Minister is due to speak soon ahead of a crucial test of his leadership next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says it's time for a fresh start in Scotland.
We will back the motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf, but we've gone further and tabled a motion of no confidence in the whole Scottish Government. And if Anna Sawar and Scottish Labour are successful with that amendment, the government will fall and there'll be fresh elections. And it is time for a fresh start in Scotland. The chaos and division at the heart of the SNP is having a real impact on public services and the lives of communities across Scotland. And we now have 2 broken governments, the SNP in Scotland and the Conservatives in Westminster. It is time for fresh elections in Scotland and across the UK.
In other news, a 20-year-old man has been charged with conducting hostile activity in the UK to benefit Russia. Dylan Earl is accused of masterminding an arson plot on London businesses after allegedly being recruited as a Russian spy. 4 other men were also charged in connection with the same investigation. And in a separate case, a former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for China. Christopher Cash, who's 29, and 32-year-old Christopher Berry are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction is an institutional betrayal. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer helped spark the Me Too movement. A major film star in the 1990s, she sued Weinstein in 2018, claiming he damaged her career after she rejected his advances. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday after a New York court ruled that he didn't receive a fair trial. The district attorney will now determine whether to seek a retrial, though he remains in prison for other crimes. Ashley Judd says the courts haven't served the needs of the victims.
This today is an act of institutional betrayal. And our institutions betray survivors of male sexual violence. I stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have bloody knees. Because male sexual violence may knock us down, but we get right back up. And together we are in this struggle for freedom from male entitlement to our bodies.
2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yiyin Both, who's 22 and from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Juma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man was bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach of Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. The world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer is being tested on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was the first person to take part in the groundbreaking trial.
I had any fear because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
And Labour says that any benefits from recent changes to tax have been wiped out by rising inflation. The party's analysis shows costs for working households are nearly £8,000 higher each year. It found the average weekly budget for a typical household is up by £150, with utility bills, food, petrol and clothes all seeing a spike in cost. The government says its economic plan is working and inflation is now coming down. MI5 is warning foreign states are targeting UK universities to undermine national security. Vice-chancellors from 24 leading universities have been alerted to the threat. The government and security services are worried that cutting-edge research could be targeted by foreign states to boost their own militaries and economies. The Deputy Prime Minister has announced a consultation on measures to protect Britain's universities. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Thanks, Sophia. Well, welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. Can Humza Yousaf save his political career? Is it hanging by a thread?
Well, we're expecting, of course, him to speak this very afternoon, so we're going to keep abreast of that. But, of course, the SNP power-sharing deal with the Greens collapsed yesterday.
Yes, and following the Scottish Conservatives' decision to lodge a motion of no confidence in the First Minister, Scottish Labour have now upped the ante by tabling a no-confidence motion in the entire Scottish Government, with their leader, Anna Sarwar, saying it is now a question of if, not when, Humza Yousaf resigns, or when, if not if.
Indeed, but let's go back to Edinburgh and speak to GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, because I suppose, Tony, there are a number of things on the table here. There's those 2 motions of no confidence next week, but also a cancelled speech from Humza Yousaf today, some words we're expecting from him this afternoon. It could all happen here.
Indeed, certainly we know that Humza Yousaf, he cancelled that independence labour market speech at Strathclyde University and instead staying in his native Dundee to speak about social housing. Now, we got a sense from the Scottish Government just before you came to me there to say that what the plan is that the Scottish Government is going to invest £600 million by 24-25, including an £80 million uplift to basically procure houses and to minimise the Scottish homelessness problem. Now, this is indeed quite a left turn to what we were expecting, but it seems to be that Humza Yousaf is, at least for now, wanting to project a business-as-usual approach. However, he will be talking to press afterward, and I can guarantee that they will not want to talk about social housing 1 second longer than they have to. There are much bigger questions in Scottish politics right now, and I will say I'm quite a fan of this lettuce chat, and certainly Humza Yousaf, for example, well, someone in his inner circle should surely be saying iceberg dead ahead, because he has far too many problems I would argue be dealing with business as usual tasks right now. But there is an idea here that perhaps this is a motion to extend an olive branch to people who he hopes will vote with him next week. But certainly the numbers don't lie. He is really up against it in those votes of no confidence. Whether or not the government the government vote of no confidence will go through is another question. But indeed, quite a lot to take in and absorb at this moment.
Certainly a huge amount to absorb. And Tony, it just reminds me of when Boris Johnson saw his government collapsing around him. What did he do? He went off to the liaison committee, started answering questions on foreign policy and all the rest of it. And while everyone sort of sat there sort of slightly bewildered, going, why aren't you talking about the political issue of your government collapsing? You're trying to project an image that just doesn't match reality. Perhaps that's what Humza Yousaf will face this afternoon. But Tony Maguire, thank you so much for joining us there live from Edinburgh.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Tony. Good stuff, keeping the iceberg lettuce afloat. We can now also get the thoughts of the former SNP MP, Angus McNeil. Angus, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show. I'm interested about how much power Ash Regan has in all this. Now, she quit the SNP, didn't she, over the self-ID issue. She thought it was becoming far too easy for people to legally change their gender in Scotland. Could Humza Yousaf have to U-turn on those issues in order to keep her support or to keep her on board to, well, decide his fate?
Yeah, the Greens forgot about the environment and the SNP forgot about independence, and they found themselves in this sorry mess. In some ways, Ash Regan is now the kingmaker, which brings on another problem for factions within the SNP, because, of course, Ash Regan is aligned to Alex Salmond, and there's some of the SNP that would rather not have independence because Alex Salmond probably wants it, and there's some visceral nonsense going on there. So it might be a problem that Humza has, not with Ash Regan or anybody else, but is to get some of the SNP guys who might not turn up at a vote of no confidence. And of course, he needs every vote, and they've all got to be there, and Ash then decides. So it's very much up in the air at the moment. There'll probably be some bluffing going on within the SNP to try and get Humza to resign before then, so that they're not smoked out as not attending in an act of disloyalty to their leader, a vote of no confidence. So the soap opera will continue.
You raise such an important point there. It's been completely under-discussed by everyone who's been talking about this. We've all been going on about how there are 63 Scottish nationalist MSPs in the Scottish Parliament who are members of the SNP, and 64 who belong to parties who are now saying that they'll vote against. But there's nothing to say that all 63 SNP MSPs will all unite behind Humza Yousaf. Now, until recently, Angus, these were your colleagues. You're now an independent MP. But do you think there's a genuine prospect there of some of these people perhaps stabbing him in the back, his own party, saying, Mr Yousaf, it's time to go?
Well, I think, firstly, with recent debacles over the last few months with the SNP, there's hardly a day goes past that I don't thank my lucky stars that I've parted ways with the SNP. I mean, unless they refocus on independence, there's no real point. But to your question about, will everybody turn up, will everybody back Humza Yousaf? I think there are some at the moment who'd like to stab him in the back but don't want to be seen doing that, and Humza could help them from making a courageous stance by resigning beforehand. So I think the pressure is on him. So Humza's probably got a battle at the moment between those who want him to stay and those who want him to go. He got rid of the Greens in a very clumsy manner. The Greens might have flounced out anyway, and he probably should have let them flounce out, to be absolutely honest. That would have seen him leave with the Greens, not feeling wounded and hurt and vengeful, as they are now, and would have seen him move to a sort of a softer landing place. But I think he wanted to be man of action, in charge of his own destiny for whatever purpose, and has found himself in this point of not of his own thinking anyway, but certainly of his own making. Now, another question then arises, did anybody advise him to do this? And if they advised him, why did they advise him? You know, was somebody else in his ear gaming it a bit further than Hamza gamed it?
But Angus, you say that he would do well to focus on independence, but surely one of the issues why Humza Yousaf is not so popular in Scotland is because he's not focusing enough on the bread and butter issues that matter to people day to day in Scotland. We've had a lot of Scottish people getting in touch who are fed up with the government seemingly not focusing on things like the cost of living, the NHS, homelessness, worklessness, drug deaths, etc., etc. So is that not the most important thing for the vast majority of people in Scotland?
You make a good list there, and there are a list of failures that apply across the United Kingdom. And we look at the United Kingdom at the moment in the state it is, with a very unpopular Conservative Party that's about to be booted out of office with a huge loss. And we look across the water to Ireland, the independent part of Ireland, with its 8 billion surplus that can do all those things. You list if it chooses with the 8 billion. We look at the part of Ireland that remained within
Where's the
UK.
evidence to suggest, Angus, where's the evidence to suggest that independence would grant Scotland the ability to do all these things? Surely, according to most economic analysis, it would cost the Scottish economy. You'd have less money to spend on public services. We've seen how hikes in taxes, for example, have pushed the wealthiest out of Scotland.
Well, I mean, rather than the theoretical, we could look at the practical. Practically, Ireland left the United Kingdom. Ireland's in a far better place. If Ireland had remained in the United Kingdom, it'd be a bigger basket case than Wales or Northern Ireland. So independence definitely works. That is there for people to see.
Well,
staying in the UK certainly doesn't work.
I think people who studied the history of Ireland would raise the question of whether it was this panacea of economic opportunity for 50 years after it left the United Kingdom. For 50 years, it was known to be a bit of an economic backwater, huge problems, low life expectancy, all the rest. It wasn't until they deregulated their economy, cut corporation tax, that they became this sort of tiger economy. But I'm not sure that's what the SNP vision for Scotland is.
The UK.
Well, I'm afraid we do. I'm being told we have to move on, but Angus McNeil, we'll have to get you back. And thank you so much for a spirited conversation.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it. Former SNP MP, now independent member of the House of Commons.
Yes, I do wonder if the vast majority of Scottish people probably would prefer the focus being on, you know, the economy, the NHS, etc., etc. Anyway, let us know what you make of that.
Looking at the polls in Ireland, I mean, there's a reason that Sinn Féin are ahead, and that there's a housing crisis and a migration crisis. I mean, Ireland's in crisis as well in many ways.
Well, if you want to escape all these crises, there is still time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies, and a £10,000 tax-free cash bank balance boost. Here's all the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm just looking at the clear water, the sunny skies, what is no doubt warm temperature, and just looking out the window and thinking, goodness me, England is not particularly sunny right now.
8 degrees and raining. No. How's it where you are?
Well, coming up next, one of Britain's most notorious killers has been released from prison after she was locked up at 14. Now, we'll be debating whether life in prison should mean life, even for kids who kill. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Nana are queer. Weekends from 3 p.m.
J.K. Rowling has accused politicians of snuggling up to trans campaigners. The Harry Potter author has called for an investigation into why political parties are embracing the language of pro-trans groups. So is it time to ditch campaign groups such as those? Well, welcome again to my clashers. Former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser, and also businessman and activist Adam Brooks.
I think the Cass report is really welcome. I think there's been a huge amount of agreement, including from some trans rights campaigners, that there's an awful lot of good in the Cass report. I think that I'm more concerned about mermaids, which is currently under a Charity Commission investigation, and some of the reports, if they're to be believed, like sending out chest binders, are more alarming. I think on Stonewall, which has done such great work over the past 30 years on LGBT rights.
It said 2-year-olds could be trans. Now, that is one of the most horrifying things I read today. Actually, J.K. Rowling tweeted that out there. To say that a 2-year-old can think that they can be another gender when my 4-year-old still thinks she's Elsa on some days. You know, there's no common sense, and to me it's
very badly phrased, Adam, I agree.
It's very sinister that these people actually believe that these kids want to change gender, and unfortunately out there are parents that almost see a trans kid as a fashion accessory now, and I think this whole agenda has pushed on people that this is normal to change gender, and we have to push back. And as I said earlier, to be trans is not normal.
Well, I don't agree with that
extreme.
phrasing. I think it's a big step, Adam, but there are clearly people throughout history who have been
But it's
trans.
not normal behaviour, is it?
I think as far as children are concerned, children need to be given the space to explore the world, and that can include experimenting with, breaking previous gender stereotypes. That doesn't mean that people should be sort of labelled at the age of 2, which I completely disagree with.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
It's 1:23 in the afternoon. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Now, a woman who 25 years ago, at the age of just 14, tortured and killed her 71-year-old grandmother was last month released from prison on licence.
But this isn't the first time she's been let out. Sarah Davey has been bailed and re-incarcerated no less than 7 times since March 2013 for breach of bail conditions.
Now, the decision to release her has caused outrage, with many arguing she should be locked up for the rest of her life.
So, should life in prison really mean life? Especially, perhaps, for child killers.
Well, to debate this, we're joined by former Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, famed for catching the notorious killer of Millie Dowler, Levi Belfield, and GB News' own Patrick Christie's. We'll start with you. Start with you, Colin. Great to have you on the show. This case is absolutely vile. Reading the detail of what happened those years ago, it's shocking to anyone. How could such a person ever be let out of jail?
Well, I mean, I think as a general rule that life should mean life, and you'd probably expect me to think that, given that I spent so much time trying to put people there. I think we have to qualify that where the killer is a child, and we have to accept that to consign somebody to be in prison for 60, 70 or 80 years is probably something that we ought to think twice about. So I understand why this happens. I think the fact that Sarah Davey was let out 7 times as an adult perhaps tends to show that she hasn't made that journey to rehabilitation in quite the way we'd expect. It's a matter for the parole board, and I think there are a number of cases recently where perhaps the views of the parole board don't actually chime with the views of the general public. You know, we think of John Warboys, we can think of Colin Pitchfork and Venables as well. And so, you know, it's something I understand the outrage. I really understand the outrage. I think that 14-year-olds who kill should be given a chance to rehabilitate? Yes, I do. Do I think that somebody who's had 7 such chances and blown them away deserves an 8th chance? Then probably I think that's a lot more doubtful.
I would have thought that by chance, sort of 3 or 4, they'd have got the picture, but clearly not. Patrick, what do you make of it all?
Well, some people are born evil, aren't they? And why should we have to suffer to have them back out on the streets? There are some crimes that are so serious that you should pay for it either with your life or for the rest of your life. This was a sadistic murder, the details of which absolutely cannot be read out on air at this particular time of day. There are 3 issues here. Is this justice for the families of victims? When someone like this is allowed out, maybe in their 30s, they can start a family of their own, they can go on holiday, they can do all of these nice things in life that person can never do because they've been killed and the families have a life sentence. Has she been punished, this individual, Sarah Davey? There's pictures of her in full makeup and dresses in prison. I would argue there are also reports of her being allowed on nights out and things like that. I don't think that's punishment. Has she been rehabilitated? You've mentioned she's been allowed out on licence 7 times. She was recalled to prison once for, as well, having drugs in her system, for goodness sake. She's breached her bail conditions. I just think a release like this is a slap in the face, really, to us all. It's another example of soft justice. And just because she's a child, well, she was old enough to commit the heinous crime she committed.
Well, Colin, are some people fundamentally born evil, irredeemable? Should we just not let some people ever back into society?
Oh yeah, absolutely agree with that entirely. You know, I understand the need for punishment, and I think that's a thing that the general public demand and desire. And I agree with that. This woman, girl, whatever she was when she committed this, it's just so horrible. She does deserve punishing for it. There's no doubt about that. I've always been really more concerned with protection and with safeguarding going forward. And I think in some ways, you know, there's a parallel thing with imprisonment. One is the punishment which society deserves, but equally important, or perhaps even more important, is the fact that we need to protect other people from these evil, wicked people going forward. And, you know, if she is in the position now, she's an adult, she's in her late 30s, I understand, and she's still not taking these chances for her rehabilitation, then I would question the decision to let her out. Absolutely, I would. It seems she's been out for about a year, and we didn't know about it. That might indicate that this time she's playing the game. But, you know, to give somebody 8 chances in those circumstances, I think is...
It seems a lot of chances for someone who committed such a horrific crime. But Patrick, surely there is a rehabilitation route for some killers, especially those who are children. Can people not change their lives around?
I mean, I would have a look at some of the evidence. You've got people like one of the Bulger killers who's been recalled to prison for some absolutely disgusting crimes, child pornography images, and drugs offences as well there. I question whether or not that individual has been rehabilitated. I think if somebody is a complete and utter murderous psychopath, I personally think there is a responsibility. The responsibility should always be to the wider public. There's people who are just deranged. Now, there is an argument as well to say, yes, fine. If somebody is a child, then maybe do give them a chance. Not 7 chances, though. Certainly not. There's other crimes, though, as well, that I just don't think you can be rehabilitated from. You know, there's a story in the Times yesterday as well about, you know, a guy who was a major player in Al-Qaeda, for example. We're apparently going to let him back out onto the streets. How many more chances do we have to give these people? You look at Usman Khan, the Fishmongers Hall attacker. He conned people into thinking he'd been rehabilitated. People died. And what I would like to ask the parole board is, when it comes to Sarah Davey, would you live next door to her? Because someone is going to have to. So would you allow these people to come out of prison and live next door to you? And if the answer to that is no, then they should spend the rest of their lives behind bars. If we're not going to introduce the death penalty, which I understand maybe not for someone who's a child that commits a crime.
Colin, you mentioned before how very often it seems the parole board is out of step with the views of the public. Why do you think it is so often the case that the parole board seems to be in such a different place to perhaps the modal morality of the United Kingdom?
Well, I mean, they're just another limb, really, of the sort of establishment that we now have, and there's this group think that is so out of step in so many ways with the vast majority of the people in this country, and they're just another facet of it, sadly. They don't have a very good track record, it has to be said, in spotting the people that ought to be released. I think that's fair to say, and a fair criticism of them. You know, and that's the issue. Of course, there will be scores of people that are paroled that we don't hear about because they do go on, I suppose, to lead a useful life, and we don't hear about that. But these high-profile cases where the act itself was of such devastating evilness, I don't think we ought to trust the record of the parole board in spotting them when they're fit for release.
Well, Colin Sutton, former Detective Chief Inspector, and, of course, our very own Patrick Christys, thank you very much for both joining us and talking through that issue. Really, really fascinating and, indeed, concerning case.
That detail of being let out 7 times already, being brought back into prison, it does kind of show, does it not, that perhaps hasn't been rehabilitated
to
live outside of the prison. I mean, I don't know. But the details of that crime are absolutely horrendous. Let us know what you make of it. gbnews.com/your say. Should life really mean life, even if you are a child when you commit the crime? 14 in this case.
Well, coming up next, more crime and justice news. An asylum seeker has been found guilty of murdering a 70-year-old pensioner. Is our broken asylum system putting British lives at risk? That next on Good Afternoon Britain.
It's 1:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. A 20-year-old man has been charged with conducting hostile activity in the UK to benefit Russia. Dylan Earl is accused of masterminding an arson plot on London businesses after allegedly being recruited as a Russian spy. 4 other men were also charged in connection with the same investigation. To other news, Scotland's First Minister is due to speak at an event in Dundee ahead of a crucial test of his leadership next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving Humza Yousaf in charge of a minority government. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says it's time for a fresh start in Scotland.
We'll back the motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf, but we've gone further and tabled a motion of no confidence in the whole Scottish Government. And if Anna Sawar and Scottish Labour are successful with that amendment, the government will fall and there'll be fresh elections. And it is time for a fresh start in Scotland. The chaos and division at the heart of the SNP is having a real impact on public services and the lives of communities across Scotland. And we now have 2 broken governments, the SNP in Scotland and the Conservatives in Westminster. It is time for fresh elections in Scotland and across the UK.
And 2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. The 5 migrants were on one of the several packed boats that pushed off from the beach at Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2512 and €1.1677. The price of gold is £1,872.90 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,118 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. After a bright start, it will cloud over for most of us and it's going to be another cool feeling day. and we will start to see a few showers breaking out, particularly across southwestern England, where this low pressure system is introducing some weather fronts. That's going to introduce a risk of some very heavy showers through this afternoon across many areas of Devon and Cornwall, then into parts of Dorset later on. Further north, for many areas of northern parts of the UK, it will turn cloudier through this afternoon, and then there's a risk of a few showers. But I think most areas should stay dry, and in the sunshine it won't feel too bad. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, still a little bit below average, but still quite cool underneath the thicker cloud across parts of the Midlands and for much of South Wales as well. It'll stay cloudy across southern areas throughout tonight, but in the north it will turn much drier and clearer through tonight. So it's going to be another cold and crisp start to Saturday across the north, but in the south, cloud will continue to build and those heavy showers will continue their journey northwards through this evening. So parts of South Wales into the Midlands could see some of that heavy rain by the start of the weekend. And across the south, it's going to stay quite cloudy throughout Saturday with those showery outbreaks of rain continuing. It might turn a little bit brighter across the south coast by lunchtime, but then those sunny spells will introduce a further risk of some heavy, possibly thundery downpours. Across northern areas, though, after a bright start, cloud will thicken once again with a risk of a few showers, but it won't feel too bad at all in the sunshine.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's start with the M8 towards Glasgow, eastbound around Hillington. At junction 26, there's a broken down vehicle. Lane 1 is blocked. Very slow northbound for the M11. Now, traffic all being held at the turn off for the M25, junction 6. It's at a stand at the moment. There's an overturned lorry there. It's causing a lot of queues. Congestion to a mile before junction 6 and 4 miles back along the anti-clockwise M25 as well. Speaking of the clockwise M25, after Sevenoaks, junction 5, about 2 miles after that junction, the inside lane's out, emergency repairs, and the westbound M26 before the M25 junction 5, the inside lane is coned off. There's queues starting to build. That's at the scene there of a collision, and that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis. And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we. We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Now, is our asylum system, our broken asylum system, putting British lives at risk?
Well, Morocco-born killer Ahmed Alid was allowed to stay in the UK after being arrested and despite having his application rejected in Italy and in Germany.
And now yesterday, he was found guilty of murdering 70-year-old Terence Carney after being inspired to take revenge for the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Well, joining us now is human rights lawyer Fadi Farhat. And Fadi, this is just an incomprehensible case to so many people. Shouldn't it have been an open and shut case that this man was rejected in Italy, rejected in Germany, and yet for 3 years his application was languishing in the UK system?
Good afternoon. Yes, well, that's a concern that everybody has, is the sort of the backlog, the time it takes for the Home Office to consider applications. This, on the face of it, was a claim which could have been assessed much more promptly than it was. It didn't need to take the best part of 3 to 4 years. I think the claim was still technically pending when the offence was committed last October. I think when the gentleman was arrested by the police, he said that he hadn't actually received the decision even until that point. So it's been pending for 3 years. And that's a concern that we have, is that there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to identify or assess cases in a preliminary fashion and determine which ones may require more further inquiries and which ones could be the subject of prompt determination. That doesn't seem to exist. It just seems to be all lumped into one, and then everything goes through the pipeline almost at once without any mechanism to distinguish the type of case, the nature of case, and that is the problem in this matter.
And what reasonable claim could a man from Morocco have to seek asylum in this country to begin with?
Well, all asylum claims are confidential by their very nature. From what we know in the public domain, he had indicated that he had a problem with Morocco's intelligence service in 2007. So that could encapsulate a variety of reasons where he may have come to the adverse attention of Morocco's intelligence service. Of course, the credibility of that needs to be assessed. On its face of it, it was dismissed in other European countries, and therefore the decisions of other countries could have been used as a platform for the UK to determine the claim here and to dismiss it on that basis, because it had been decided and it could have used the material already decided and known, and that didn't happen, and that led to a long period of delay. But Morocco is a country which is it's a tourist destination, it's a developing country, but it also has its problems. So it's very difficult to speculate as to what he may have encountered in Morocco, but that's the official reason provided.
It's interesting. I suppose there are so many different points of failure in this case. The speed of the UK system overall, the intelligence sharing that we could and perhaps should have with other countries. But how do we fix it? How do we speed up this system? It used to not be this slow.
Yes, and it's when we say how do we fix it, it's just going back to basics, because even in this case, 2 days before the commission of the offence, his own roommate, who he stabbed first before going on to stab the retiree in the morning as the retiree was walking his dog. But 2 days before, his roommate had made a complaint to police that he was watching extremist material on his phone, and that just wasn't acted upon. So
and apparently his housemate, who was an Iranian asylum seeker, he reported him to the police, and he told Home Office housing managers that he would sit in the kitchen brandishing a knife, and apparently, reportedly, he was told we can't do anything unless he's walking around with the knife and threatening. So essentially you have to wait for the crime to actually happen before anyone does anything. So it's a failure on the police, failure on the Home Office housing managers, failure on the Home Office, but also if he serves his sentence in this country and is eventually let out, could he potentially have the right still to stay in this country? I mean, there's always lawyers who are willing to find loopholes, aren't there?
That's correct. However, the Refugee Convention, for all its perceived ills, does actually contain inbuilt provisions for the exclusion or denial of refugee status. That's inbuilt in Article 33.2 of the 1951 Convention, and indeed that's in our law in Section 72 of the Nationality, Immigration and Asylum Act. And what Section 72 provides is that you will be excluded from protection if you are deemed to constitute a danger to the community. And you are deemed to constitute a danger to the community if you have been convicted of an offence with a custodial sentence of at least 1 year. So on the face of it, for all the Convention's perceived ills, it's not a system of law where the other cheek is always turned away. So he should, I expect the Section 72 provision should be invoked by the Home Secretary, and his asylum claim will be dismissed.
Well, Fadi Farhat, thank you so much for talking through that situation, particularly the grounds under that 1951 Refugee Convention whereby he could actually be removed. Really interesting stuff. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. And the failures, the multiple failures. But after the break, we're going to get all the latest details on Humza Yousaf's future with our Scotland reporter. Humza Yousaf, he fights on. He says he will not resign ahead of that no-confidence vote.
But is it his choice? This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable. apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joined us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job, and also I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing, and yet the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the Princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there's something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 13 minutes to 2, but now Humza Yousaf has said he will not resign as First Minister. Well, he was speaking to broadcasters and he is really quite insistent, despite the pressure around him. He said that he won't stand down and will fight on. Do you know who once said, I fight on and I fight on to win?
Go on then, tell us.
It was Margaret Thatcher in 1990. She resigned 2 days later. But,
could it follow the same trend?
Well,
2 days.
Could
very
possibly.
very different political characters.
Very different. Well, one was successful and one wasn't. But let's cross to Edinburgh now and speak to GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Tony, Humza is insisting he fights on, but it's really not him that makes the final choice.
I think that is it exactly, Tom. You know, he is coming out with the fighting spirit. Just as Stephen Flynn said earlier today, he will come out swinging, and swinging he did. He spoke to press just in the last hour up in Dundee, and he said he has no intentions of stepping down. He is going to fight this vote of no confidence next week, and he's also going to write round to the other parties and ask them to help make this minority government work. Now, minority government's just for the uninitiated, the first essentially 12 years of the Scottish was run by a minority government, first Labour and then Alex Salmond's SNP party during its first term. So it's nothing really new, essentially has been going for about half of the Parliament's life up here. But as you say, this is essentially not really Humza Yousaf's decision, because if that vote of no confidence comes down against him, then, you know, he doesn't really have a mandate to continue to lead the country or, you know, arguably the party. So
what then happens is really up to the SNP as a political party, but then the Scottish Government will need to, consider whether it, wants to push forward with an election, or indeed whether it then has to go into this second potentially vote of no confidence, this time in the government. And now that would legally mean that we would be heading into an election footing.
And Tony, I understand he was asked whether he would work with the Alba Party leader Ash Regan, who is, critical in his future, potentially in his survival. And he said, I'll write to all leaders. And he's invited them all to attempt to make minority government work. I mean, what are the chances of that in your mind, Tony? What are the chances of Humza Yousaf being able to see this out, being able to get enough people on board to make his government work?
I think, certainly some of the political analysts up here, they've spent the last, 12 hours, really coming to the agreement that I think Humza Yousaf would prefer to have actually gone through, weathered this storm with the Green Party. I will remind you, though, of, last year when Ash Regan, when she defected to Alba, Humza Yousaf's comment was, no great loss. Well, he will very much be eating those words now. The levels and layers of irony around this situation, because, of course, if Ash Regan votes even with the SNP government, that will give them 64 votes in a vote of no confidence, votes with Humza Yousaf against all of the opposition parties. Now, that would mean that the presiding officer, of course, she would get the casting vote. Convention says that she would vote with the government, but then that would also be against her own party, her former party, the Scottish Greens. So you can kind of see the layers of complexity, and actually it can still go absolutely any which way at this point.
It's interesting that Humza Yousaf uses this language of fighting. He says he'll fight on. I was just remembering Liz Truss on her final Prime Minister's questions as Prime Minister. She said, I'm a fighter, not a quitter. She used those words on the 19th of October. She resigned on the 20th.
Certainly it seems like Humza Yousaf, it seems like there's almost been a memo going around all SNP offices that, this is something to fight. Certainly Stephen Flynn, I don't think it's any surprise that he also used those words earlier. But, what better word for it? Humza Yousaf and arguably the SNP, they are fighting for their future leading this country. And certainly, over the last 5 years, we've seen an even further step away from Westminster. I don't remember a time, in my 15 years as a journalist, ever remember, a time where Westminster and Holyrood felt further apart. But, irrespective of how they feel about independence, we are a family of nations, and that has really worked against him as after he took over from Nicola Sturgeon.
Absolutely. And Tony, let's be frank, the Scottish public, the Scottish people aren't going to be impressed with this amount of chaos at the top of their government, are they? Is his popularity, I imagine, is going to take a huge hit, even more of a hit?
Well, yeah, even more of a hit. That's quite important because, of course, his popularity has gone right down, and I think in his first year there was a lot of talk of, well, how much of Humza Yousaf's problems are actually Humza Yousaf's? How much did he inherit from his predecessor? But, as we've moved into his second year, I think it's quite clear now that some of his problems, most recently yesterday, have very much been of his own making. Now, he could use this breakaway from the Butte House Agreement, which he succinctly described as 19 Liz Trusses, and it's 969 days of procession. But, he could use this split to redefine the SNP, but the SNP have put so much effort into becoming this broad tent, this broad church of ideas, that it seems if he needs to get all of his MSPs to back him next week, then it's difficult to really see a way how he can make everybody happy. Somebody is always going to feel like, their views are not getting heard here.
Well, Tony Maguire, thank you very much for all of that live from Edinburgh. What a moment it has turned out to be today. And I suppose all the pressure now ramps up for those 2 no-confidence motions next week. Tony, thank you.
Remember, was it Tony yesterday who was asking the public, and he was actually delivering the news?
Yes.
Delivering the news.
People's first reactions are always very, very interesting. But we've just got time to ask our friend down here, Humza Yousleif. It looks like Humza Yousleif will now last the weekend.
Got to remove the strap here. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
There he is.
But I think Humza Yousleif might last the weekend as well. The question is, will he last Monday? Will he last Tuesday? Could he make it all the way to Wednesday?
He says he's fighting. He's fighting. But as you mentioned, a lot of political leaders have said that before, haven't they?
They have indeed.
And they've gone down.
Well, it's going to be an absolutely fascinating time in Holyrood. Lots of twists and turns to come and much more here on Good Afternoon Britain. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for many of us through the rest of today, but there will be some heavy rain starting to arrive into the south. That's as this area of low pressure is arriving with these weather fronts. That's bringing the heavier rain we've seen across parts of Cornwall so far today, and that will continue to push northwards throughout this evening. So parts of Devon, Dorset, Cornwall, possibly South Wales will see some heavy outbreaks of rain through this evening, and then by tomorrow morning, a further batch will arrive into the southeast. Ahead of that, it's going to be quite a cloudy night for much of Wales and central areas of England, but to the north of this area, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, another clear and cold night. So we're likely to see a frost again in similar areas to where we saw this morning by Saturday morning. But there will be a lot of sunshine around once again across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, parts of Northern England as well. The best of sunshine will be in the morning on Saturday. The cloud will bubble up just as it has done today, and there is a risk of a few showers breaking out here and there, particularly at the coasts. For parts of Wales and central areas, it'll be quite cloudy and a cold feeling day. And into the southeast, we start to see some showery outbreaks of rain by the afternoon, and it will start to feel a bit warmer. Now, those showery outbreaks of rain become a large swathe of rain for Sunday, so more areas are going to see a wetter day on Sunday, particularly across eastern areas and across southern areas of England. Now, that rain will move out into the North Sea through Monday, and it's going to turn considerably milder with highs of 19 degrees on Tuesday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday, the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis. And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we. We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday, the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 p.m. on Friday, the 26th of April.
And Humza Yousaf vows to fight on. The Scottish First Minister says he will not resign and intends to fight the votes of no confidence in him. But is his political future still hanging by a thread?
He fights on to win. Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron slams the UK's Rwanda Act as betrayal of values, whilst berating Britain for Brexit. But this from a man whose own values allowed a ban on the burqa and tear gas at pro-Palestine rallies, indeed banning many of those pro-Palestine rallies. Is Macron a world-class hypocrite?
And Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves visited the North East today to discuss the cost of living. The Shadow Chancellor sat down with GB News' own political editor, Christopher Hope, to talk about their plans for cracking down on benefits cheats and whether a Labour government would scrap the Rwanda Act.
Humza Yousaf says he'll fight on. I'm just thinking of all of the times that prime ministers and political leaders have said they'll fight on. Liz Truss said it on the 19th of October in 2022. The next day she resigned. That was originally a quote from Peter Mandelson just before he resigned as a cabinet minister. I'm a fighter, not a quitter. Margaret Thatcher said it in 1990. I fight on to win. Of course, she then didn't stand in the next round of that election, losing her job as Prime Minister in the process.
It's like they've all got a script. But you know what? It just does also show just how brutal and vicious politics can be, doesn't it? You can believe that you can fight on. I mean, if he does genuinely believe it, we don't know what's in his heart. But you could say you want to fight on, you can believe you will fight on, and then the next day, off you go.
Well, I mean, the question is, will our friend Humza Yousaf last as long or even longer than Humza Yousaf? That's our big question. Entirely an original idea, of course, here at GB News. We completely invented it ourselves and are not shamelessly riding on the on the coattails of the Daily Star. But
I do apologise. I do apologise.
Apologise. You came dressed as the letters.
I know I did, but that was a mistake. A perfect coincidence. A perfect coincidence.
I do think it is very interesting, though, to see back at Boris Johnson's demise as Prime Minister. He said, when the herd moves, it moves. And it certainly feels like that sense that the Greens have now left Humza Yousaf, that there is a certain element of inevitability, a when, not an if, about his demise as First Minister of Scotland.
The knives are out. The knives are out. Well, let us know what you make of it all. gbnews.com/your say. Do you think Humza Yousaf will cling on? Do you believe he'll cling on, or will he go in a matter of days? Let us know. gbnews.com/your say. Should we get the headlines?
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Humza Yousaf says he will not resign as Scotland's First Minister ahead of a crucial test of his leadership next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving him in charge of a minority government. The Liberal Democrats are among those calling for a change of leader. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says it's time for a fresh start in Scotland.
We will back the motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf, but we've gone further and tabled a motion of no confidence in the whole Scottish Government. And if Anna Sawar and Scottish Labour are successful with that amendment, the government will fall and there'll be fresh elections. And it is time for a fresh start in Scotland. The chaos and division at the heart of the SNP is having a real impact on public services and the lives of communities across Scotland. And we now have two broken governments, the SNP in Scotland and the Conservatives in Westminster. It is time for fresh elections in Scotland and across the UK.
In other news, students in Paris have occupied the prestigious Sciences Po University to demand the institution condemns Israel's actions in Gaza. Chanting their support for the Palestinians and waving flags, many of the protesters can also be seen wearing headscarves and face coverings in solidarity with the people of Gaza. It comes after similar protests at universities in the United States and Australia. A 20-year-old man has been charged with conducting hostile activity in the UK to benefit Russia. Dylan Earle is accused of masterminding an arson plot on London businesses after allegedly being recruited as a Russian spy. 4 other men were also charged in connection with the same investigation. And in a separate case, a former parliamentary researcher has been ordered not to contact MPs after he was charged with spying for Russia. Christopher Cash, who's 29 and 32 years old, Christopher Berry, are accused of offences under the Official Secrets Act. The pair appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning, but were not required to enter any pleas. In the US, the actress Ashley Judd says the overturning of Harvey Weinstein's rape conviction is an institutional betrayal. Her allegation of sexual assault by the Hollywood producer helped spark the Me Too movement. A major film star in the 1990s, she sued Weinstein in 2018, claiming he damaged her career after she rejected his advances. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned yesterday after a New York court ruled that he didn't receive a fair trial. The district attorney will now determine whether to seek a retrial, though he remains in prison for other crimes. Ashley Judd says the court haven't served the needs of the victims.
This today is an act of institutional betrayal. And our institutions betray survivors of male sexual violence. I stand shoulder to shoulder with women who have bloody knees. Because male sexual violence may knock us down, but we get right back up. And together we are in this struggle for freedom from male entitlement to our bodies.
2 men have been charged with immigration offences after the deaths of 5 migrants, including a young girl who were trying to cross the English Channel. Yian Both, who's 22 and from South Sudan, and Tajdeen Abdulaziz Juma, who's also 22 and from Sudan, were both charged with offences related to the deadly incident. An 18-year-old Sudanese man was bailed pending further inquiries. The 5 migrants were on one of several packed boats that pushed off from the beach at Wimereux in France on Tuesday morning. The world's first personalised vaccine for skin cancer is being tested on British patients. It works by telling the body to hunt down cancer cells and also has the potential to stop lung, bladder and kidney cancers. The jab uses the same technology as the COVID vaccines and is designed to trigger the body's immune system. Teacher Steve Young was the first person to take part in the groundbreaking trial.
Fear, because by doing the trial, I feel like I'm actively doing something to give it a kicking, basically.
And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. And Humza Yousaf has said he'll not resign as First Minister. It reminds me of when Liz Truss said she wouldn't resign as Prime Minister, when Boris Johnson said he wouldn't resign as Prime Minister, and when Margaret Thatcher said she wouldn't resign as Prime Minister.
You never know. He might cling on, Tom. You might eat your words. You might eat your words. But yes, we may have seen this before. But speaking to broadcasters, he said he will not stand down and intends to fight the vote of no confidence in him lodged by the Conservatives.
Well, the First Minister said he would be writing to all leaders, inviting them to a meeting in an attempt to make minority government work.
Yes, he's been under pressure, and I say that again, since his party's power-sharing agreement with the Green Party collapsed suddenly yesterday. So is he a man in denial, or could he cling on? Could he continue? We're joined once again by GBNews Scotland reporter Tony Maguire. Tony, we're hearing a lot of what he said to the broadcasters. Can you recap what his position is as it stands?
Indeed, well, he very much has spoken to the press over in Dundee, announcing £80 million for social housing. But indeed, broadcasters, as you might expect, moved on from that topic all too quickly and asked him about the current situation and whether his position is tenable. And he says that he will come out fighting, matching the words, matching the energy very much of Stephen Flynn, the Westminster leader of the SNP, earlier today, who said that Humza Yousaf, Scotland's First Minister, is looking to fight. Now, the First Minister says that he is going to fight both of these votes of no confidence next week. We already know that the Scottish Tory vote from Douglas Ross, that has the votes. That will go to a vote in Parliament next week. We expect the same to happen from the Labour vote of no confidence from Anas Sarwar. But certainly the question is, how much does he have left in the tank for this? Now, he was asked repeatedly, had he considered his position, to which he vehemently said no. He had not at all thought about his position and whether it was still tenable as First Minister. But it begs the question of, with all of this attention on him, with all of this, and should he lose that vote of no confidence, why has he not considered the possibility that he might not make it into the end of next week? Now, of course, a vote in no confidence in the First Minister does not mean that he has to resign, but it sure does look bad if he tries to continue in spite of what his Parliament around him thinks.
It's interesting looking at all of the instances where people have said, I'm not going to resign, there's no way I'll resign. I was just looking at some of the historical, and it's just about every single Prime Minister who has resigned in the history of this country has all too frequently, before they have resigned, said they're not going to resign. I wonder, Tony, this call to meet with all the party leaders in Scotland, this is seeming a bit desperate, perhaps, from Humza Yousaf, sort of scrapping around and scraping for any sort of ally he can find.
Well, it's worth saying that there's only one person who's really, when they come out and say they're not going to give up and they're going to fight, is worth listening to, and that's Rocky Balboa. Humza Yousaf is not Rocky, and certainly if he is looking for a scrap next week, there is no shortage of opponents looking to take him up on that. Now, this invitation, if you like, to make minority government work, as we spoke about a little earlier, minority government is nothing new in Scotland. Indeed, the first 12 years of the Scottish Parliament was very much led by minority government. Things have progressed, though, and I think that we shouldn't really take that in a vacuum. We have to look at this, cascade of events which have happened quite unbelievably in a little over 24 hours, and just how fast, every time that I get a chance to speak to the two of you, there's new developments, things are moving so fast, and Humza Yousaf is going to have to try and keep up. Now, it is worth also saying that a weekend is a well-established cure to a lot of gripes and grievances. We'll have to see whether the Scottish Greens and indeed Scottish Labours are going to stick to their position come Monday morning.
That's a very good point indeed, actually. It is Friday afternoon. Could things cool off over the weekend? Could he be given a little bit of leeway to try and manage things, manage the narrative, manage the media hype and so on? Or could it be game over this weekend? We don't know. We await to see. Thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire, GB News News Scotland reporter. It is true, a lot can change over a weekend.
A lot can change, but the question is, with people not in Parliament, might there be SNP MSPs who sort of gather together, do some plotting?
That's true.
Could it be actually internal moves within the SNP that dislodge him before we get to those votes of no confidence? That's what Angus MacNeil, the former SNP MP, now independent MP, was saying. But one of his colleagues in the House of Commons is the Alba Party MP, Neil Hanvey, also first elected as an SNP member. Neil, I'm fascinated about the internal dynamics within the SNP. Surely there'll be moves from some who just want to see their leader go.
Well, that may be true. You know, there's been lots of talk of backroom briefings against the First Minister even before this happened, and I think, you know, that underscores the position of the First Minister. I think his top-line briefing needs updated. He entered the debate yesterday with his press conference saying that he was a leader and a fighter and so on. But that decision that he took yesterday to blow up the Butte House Agreement has delivered a cascade of events that he has no control over now, and he really is at the mercy of so many others. And what's really important to remember with the opposition parties, Humza Yousaf and indeed his predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon, have made no secret of their hostility towards any of the other parties in Scottish politics other than the Scottish Green Party. So it's a bit rich for the First Minister to now be reaching out and asking for cooperation from everybody that he's been insulting for the last number of years. But of course, you know, events are quite interesting, and our leader in the Scottish Parliament, Ash Regan, has written to the First Minister this morning, setting out our party's position in terms of what we'd like to hear back from the First Minister, what Ash Regan has asked to hear back from the First Minister. And those are really important points. Independence, a complete reversal on the policies that threaten women, children and LGBT people's rights, and a focus on the proper business of government, on public services and saving important industrial apparatus like Grangemouth oil refinery from closure.
She's trying to set the agenda, isn't she? Now, this statement was released at least on Twitter at about 9 o'clock this morning. Her position hasn't changed. She remains open to any discussion where we progress the priorities of the people of Scotland, as you outlined. That remains the position of the Alba Party.
Well, you know, I mean, in Ash Regan, we have a very competent, capable and principled politician, someone who has made no secret of her concerns, particularly over the queer theory policies that the Green Party so favoured and that the SNP have found so deeply wounding for their own popularity. So that's an immovable issue, certainly for myself on a personal level, and certainly for our membership.
But Neil, you're basically holding the sword of Damocles over the First Minister's neck here. It's Ash Regan who's basically saying, make me First Minister in all but name, and I'll let you stay in the job. Make you my puppet. I mean, Humza Yousaf's in her pocket now.
Well, I mean, that may be one interpretation that you want to place on it, Tom. It's not where we're coming from. You know, we're very earnest and very clear in the position that we set out as a party. We're willing to engage in dialogue. It's now up to the First Minister to respond to that very clear letter from Ash Regan, you know, and she's made her position very clear.
I mean, she does say the opportunity to write a new chapter for Scotland is in our hands. In our hands. Promoting herself.
Well, I don't necessarily think that you should read too much into specific words in the letter like that. You know, I know Ash has not come to a conclusion. I spent yesterday afternoon with her in Holyrood. This is a huge decision to rest on her shoulders, but she's not a person who has been able to be pushed around or bullied in the past, and I certainly don't anticipate that she will be letting anyone push her around or bully her again. But what also became very clear yesterday was that the Green Party, their support for Scottish independence is a mirage. Their support for the climate is also a mirage. The only issue that they're prepared to draw a line over is the insinuation of queer theory policies into every part of public life, and that must be resisted.
Just finally, Neil, does it matter that when Ash Regan quit the SNP, Humza Yousaf said she's no great loss? Does that personal history between Ash Regan and Humza Yousaf make that relationship just very, very difficult to work?
Well, I mean, I think that's just a really clear example of the points I made at the beginning of this segment, which is that Humza's managed to insult everyone around him, and yet here he finds himself now with the begging bowl looking for support. Ash is a mature human, adult human female, and she will put the interests of the people of Scotland first and foremost in reckoning. She's not going to play the vindictive games that others have played over the last number of years. She will do what's absolutely right and in the best
Neil, she's certainly got the support of J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling coming out very strongly, talking about the irony of Humza Yousaf now needing her after she left his government over this issue of gender self-ID. Thank you very much indeed. Neil Hanvey, Albert Party MP. Great to speak to you.
I'm sure that Neil will be having conversations with Ash this weekend. This is where it's all happening. It's all the sort of dealings and sort of conversations that are going to be determining the fate of the Scottish government. Absolutely fascinating time.
And do people take insults actually seriously in politics? Is it water under the bridge? Anyway, after the break, we're going to be speaking to political editor Christopher Hope, who's been speaking to the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves about lots of things. We'll find out what he had to say and what she had to say. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is, tough love. You're going to take your medicine. It's going to be good for you. You may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported. And not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country. You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Right, well, it's 2:23. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and his shadow chancellor have been visiting the North East today to discuss lots of things, including the cost of living.
But our very own Christopher Hope has been with the shadow chancellor and joins us now. Christopher, you've been speaking about all sorts of things with the shadow chancellor, and I hear she has revealed quite a bit about Labour's plans.
Yes, hi Tom, hi Emily. I'm here in Darlington. We spoke earlier to Rachel Reeves. She told us about how she talks to Tony Blair regularly, that she will crack down on benefit cheats if she gets into power, not just on tax avoiders and tax evaders. She spoke twice, wouldn't say, if she'd abandon the Rwanda plan if it works and deters small boats crossings, and also spoke, Tom, just for you really, about these new towns and where the new Labour government, if it is formed, might put them. Well, I'm afraid to say keep waiting on that until after the consultation after a Labour government. But here's a feeling, here's an indication of what she had to say.
Rachel Reeves, thank you for speaking to GB News here in Darlington. The NAO head Gareth Davis said in January that fraud and errors costing taxpayers $5.5 billion a year in universal credit, but you're going after tax avoiders, people who might be illegally avoiding tax. Why not go after benefit cheats too?
I've got no time for anybody that is cheating the system, whether that is benefit fraud or tax evasion, and indeed want to toughen the rules, for example, on non-doms to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share of tax. But I think that there is something particularly abhorrent about taking money from the taxpayer, because what you're doing then is depriving our public services of the money they need. And so we will crack down on that fraud wherever it exists.
Will the government bring down debt over the first 5 years of a Labour government?
Yes, I've set out a tough set of fiscal rules that an incoming Labour government will abide by to bring debt down as a share of our economy and to pay for day-to-day spending through tax receipts. And only subject to that, we'll be able to make the investments in the things to grow our economy and improve productivity.
The Tories will cut the civil service to pay for defence spending to keep us all safe and hit 2.5% of GDP by 2030. Will you?
Well, we've already said that we've committed to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. The problem about the government's figures is they haven't set out how they will achieve it. And defence is too important to make promises like this without being able to say where the money's going to come from. So we want to get to 2.5%. We want to do that as quickly as possible. But we'll have to do a review of defence spending and understand the state of the public finances.
They say they'll get rid of tens of thousands of civil servants and pay for it, but you won't say that, will you? You can't cost your plan. It's an ambition, not a realistic possibility yet.
Well, when Labour left office in 2010, defence spending was at 2.5% of GDP. Since then, this government has made cuts that our army is now the smallest since Napoleonic times. It's them that have reduced spending on defence. We are committed to get back to 2.5% of GDP. Independent experts have said that the government have not put forward the level of detail that is needed. And I think defence is too important to make promises without being able to say how you can pay for them.
So yes or no, will you hit 2.5% by 2030?
Well, we will hit 2.5% and we'll set out the details of how we'll achieve that.
Can't say by when?
Well, nor can the government, because their plans are not fully costed and they haven't set those out.
On immigration, GB News polling this week shows our viewers really care about illegal migration. If 10,000 migrants are flown to Rwanda and it starts to deter the small boats crossings, will you still cancel that project?
Well, not a single flight has taken off to Rwanda so far. In fact, the only people who have gone to Rwanda are Conservative Home Secretaries. We want to stop the boats. That is absolutely essential to get control again of our borders after the Conservatives have lost control. But I'm not willing to spend money on expensive gimmicks, and this has cost tens of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. That money should be put into cracking down on the criminal gangs and deporting people who have got no right to be in this country.
If it's shown to work, though, by the time you get into office, if you do, will you still scrap it?
Well, there's an awful lot of ifs there, Chris, because at the moment, not a single asylum seeker has been sent to Rwanda. The only people who have gone there are press teams with Conservative Home Secretaries. This is an expensive gimmick, and it's a distraction from the real work that needs to take place to get control of our borders again, and that is what a Labour government is determined to do.
The Tories say that the fact that illegal migrants are flooding into Ireland shows it's working by deterring people from staying here. Is that a good thing?
I mean, the idea that this government's immigration policy and asylum policy is working is for the birds. We've got asylum seekers in hotels up and down the country, in hotels that were once used for local functions, for weddings, for graduations, and it is not acceptable that the government have lost control of the borders in the way that they have. Labour have got a plan to crack down on the criminal gangs at the heart of this, and also to ensure that we properly process the claims and then people who have got no right to be in this country are quickly deported. The government have not been able to deliver that, and incoming Labour government is determined to do so.
Turning to planning, to get more homes built, you say your party will take a bulldozer to the planning system. You want more planning officers, redefine what green belt is as a grey belt. Is that enough to take on the NIMBYs?
Well, our approach is a brownfield-first approach, and I was in the West Midlands yesterday in Birmingham and in Walsall, looking at two fantastic housing projects on brownfield sites. But the developers there say that what's holding them back from more development is a bureaucratic and sclerotic planning system that makes it so slow and more expensive to build the housing that we desperately need. But there are also parts of what we call the grey belt, which is a car park, perhaps, or a petrol station on what is designated as green belt, and it's harder to build on that than it is, for example, on a field in a town. That is wrong. We need to protect those green spaces in urban areas and have a brownfield-first approach.
And that is a challenge. You won't announce where your new towns are until after the election. Why not?
Because we have a consultation on that in government. But we've got some fantastic new towns in Britain, from Milton Keynes to Welwyn Garden City.
They're very old ones, aren't they?
Yes, and those are new towns that were pioneered by past Labour governments that are beautiful places to live, aspirational places to live, and we'll consult in government about where the new towns of the future, so that families and young people have a chance of getting on the housing ladder again.
Do older people with a paid-for house, maybe paid off their mortgage, have a moral duty not to fight new development?
Well, people who have paid off their mortgage have often got children and grandchildren who are desperate to get on the housing ladder. That's why we've committed to 1.5 million new homes in the first term of a Labour government. But home ownership under the Conservatives has fallen by 500,000. The Conservatives were once a party of home ownership. It's clear today that only the Labour Party is the party of home ownership in Britain.
Just on Rosie Duffield, your colleague in the Labour Party, she says your party has a problem with women. Is she right?
Well, I'm really proud to be Shadow Chancellor in the Labour Party, and if Labour win the next election, I'll be the first ever female Chancellor of the Exchequer.
But what about her criticism of the leadership? He says that Keir Starmer won't speak to her. Rishi Sunak is nicer than Keir Starmer.
Well, I've been with Keir this morning, and he's out on the campaign trail right now. Rosie Duffield is an important member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. I've known her a long time. All of us over the next 7 days are going to be hitting the streets and the doorsteps as part of these local elections. But after that, we're back in Parliament, and I'll certainly be seeing Rosie then.
Perhaps an apology is due to her?
Well, I'm not sure what the allegations are, but Rosie is an important member of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and as a woman in the Labour Party, and along with Angela Rayner, in a senior position in the Labour Party, I'm really proud of the role that Labour women are playing in this local election campaign and the general election, whenever the Conservatives have the guts to call it.
But they're worried about your employment reforms, aren't they? About the issue for those on short contracts and whether they can get rights that we normally go to people who've worked there for a while.
The New Deal for working people is an important part of our growth agenda, because we need to get more people back into the workplace, and we need to ensure that, once again, that work offers the security with a wage that you can afford to live on, and the guarantee of hours. But this is a pro-business policy, and we're consulting with business on all of our policies, including on employment rights.
Rachel Reeves, thank you for talking today to GB News here in Darlington. Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting stuff there, Chris. You sort of extracted out a bit of a U-turn then from the Labour Party. Initially, they said they wouldn't U-turn on Rwanda, and now they might keep it.
Yeah, we've heard a bit about that from Baroness Chapman, Jenny Chapman of Darlington. She's a key ally of Keir Starmer. If you give them a number, say 10,000 migrants might be sent back to Rwanda, they can't say they'll scrap that. As Rachel Reeves knows, this money is sunk money. The money is invested. If it's starting to work even a bit, it's hard to get rid of it.
Thank you very much indeed. Great interview, really insightful. Christopher Hope there, our political editor, live from Darlington. He's got to catch the train now, I think. Still to come, we'll digest that interview a little bit more. But are scientists about to discover that we are not alone? A new space telescope is set to turn its gaze towards a distant planet to investigate one of the most tantalising hints of alien life ever discovered. Have we found aliens? That is the question after your headlines.
It's 2:34. I'm Sophia Wenzer in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. Humza Yousaf says he will not resign as Scotland's First Minister ahead of a crucial test of his leadership next week. It's after the collapse of the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens yesterday, leaving him in charge of a minority government. The Liberal Democrats are among those calling for a change of leader. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says it's time for a fresh start in Scotland.
We will back the motion of no confidence in Humza Yousaf, but we've gone further and tabled a motion of no confidence in the whole Scottish Government. And if Anna Sawar and Scottish Labour are successful with that amendment, the government will fall and there'll be fresh elections. And it is time for a fresh start in Scotland. The chaos and division at the heart of the SNP is having a real impact on public services and the lives of communities across Scotland. And we now have two broken governments, the SNP in Scotland and the Conservatives in Westminster. It is time for fresh elections in Scotland and across the UK.
Students in Paris have occupied the prestigious Sciences Po University to demand the institution condemns Israel's actions in Gaza. Chanting their support for the Palestinians and waving flags, many of the protesters can also be seen wearing headscarves and face coverings in solidarity with the people of Gaza. It comes after similar protests at universities in the United States and Australia. A 20-year-old man has been charged with conducting hostile activity in the UK to benefit Russia. Dylan Earle is accused of masterminding an arson plot on London businesses after allegedly being recruited as a Russian spy. 4 other men were also charged in connection with the same investigation. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, interesting what you pointed out about Rachel Reeves there, not committing to scrap the Rwanda Act in its entirety if, say, 10,000 people were sent to Rwanda. But I mean, what could she say? I mean, would she genuinely come out and say, yeah, we'd scrap it even if 10,000, even if it was working,
well,
even if it was really working?
That had been the Labour Party position.
It had
initially,
been, yes.
But it seems like the Labour Party now is doing a lot of non-committal, where they're saying we're not going to commit to doing one thing or another on Rwanda if it's working. But also, really interestingly there, again, Rachel Reeves saying, oh, we'd like to build these new towns. We're just not going to tell you where they'll be. And if anyone knows anything about the struggles that Boris Johnson had trying to pass planning reform and Liz Truss and all the rest of it, unless you have an electoral mandate for something, it's really hard to get it through the House of Commons. It's going to be a huge scrap under the next Labour government if they win. If they don't say where these towns are going to be, how do people know what they're voting on if they don't know where the new towns are going to go?
Yes, if they win, it might be a slow start, a slow and juddering start to governing. Let's see. But coming up at 3 o'clock, and it won't be a slow, juddering start, it is Martin Daubney. Martin, what have you got on your show for us today?
We've got a corker of a show today. Ireland on the brink as immigration soars into Ireland. The government there blames the UK, blames the Rwanda deal. But as an asylum hotel was firebombed last night, we speak to a political leader who says the only people to blame are the woke politicians in Ireland and the police who are turning on the people. Plus, will we have a second referendum by 2040? I'll be joined by legendary pollster Sir John Curtis, who says that yes, we will, because of changing demographics. And guess what? The Labour Party cozying up to Brussels. Talking of which, we spoke to Rachel Reeves earlier and we asked her, how involved is Tony Blair in Sir Keir Starmer's party? The answer might give you sleepless nights. And finally, tomorrow there's a counter-protest by a pro-Israeli group who are crying enough is enough. I'll be joined in the studio by the leader who's telling me why he is risking his safety going out there and fighting back. It's all on my show, 3 till 6.
Sounds fantastic. It'll be interesting to see how that protest is policed. Very interesting indeed. Thanks to you, Martin Dolney. Stay tuned for his show at 3 o'clock, as always.
Well, still to come, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, he's slammed the UK's Rwanda plan.
Everyone's slamming it.
But is Mr Macron a first-class hypocrite? After all, he, as French President, has presided over a ban on the burqa and increased deportations. They deport more people from France than we do in the UK.
Yes, they're better at it.
We'll discuss that next.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. After a bright start, it will cloud over for most of us and it's going to be another cool feeling day. And we will start to see a few showers breaking out, particularly across southwestern England, where this low pressure system is introducing some weather fronts. That's going to introduce a risk of some very heavy showers through this afternoon across many areas of Devon and Cornwall, then into parts of Dorset later on. Further north, for many areas of northern parts of the UK, it will turn cloudier through this afternoon, and then there's a risk of a few showers. But I think most areas should stay dry, and in the sunshine, it won't feel too bad. Highs of around 11 or 12 degrees, still a little bit below average, but still quite cool underneath the thicker cloud across parts of the Midlands and for much of South Wales as well. It'll stay cloudy across southern areas throughout tonight, but in the north, it will turn much drier and clearer through tonight. So it's going to be another cold and crisp start to Saturday across the north, but in the south, cloud will continue to build and those heavy showers will continue their journey northwards through this evening. So parts of South Wales into the Midlands could see some of that heavy rain by the start of the weekend. And across the south, it's going to stay quite cloudy throughout Saturday with those showery outbreaks of rain continuing. Might turn a little bit brighter across the south coast by lunchtime, but then those sunny spells will introduce a further risk of some heavy, possibly thundery downpours. Across northern areas, though, after a bright start, cloud will thicken once again with a risk of a few showers, but it won't feel too bad at all in the sunshine.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. If you're heading towards Glasgow, there's a breakdown on the eastbound M8. It's around the Hillington turn-off junction 26. The inside lane of 3 is currently blocked. Big queues northbound for the M11. It's closed at the M25 junction 6 for an overturned lorry. The queues, well, 2 miles worth back toward Loughton junction 5 and for 5 miles back along the anti-clockwise M25. And speaking of the anti-clock M25, from junction 27 towards Waltham Abbey at 26, the inside lane is shut there at the scene of a collision. That's causing queues at the moment. And then in London, into town, the A12, Newbury Park, from Newbury Park Station to Leigh Street, that's queuing. A collision causing delays heading back towards the Seven Kings turn-off on that stretch at the moment. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 42 minutes past 2. Now, Rwanda-style plans are betraying European values. Well, that's according to the French president, Emmanuel Macron, who hit out at countries considering sending immigrants to countries in the third world, as it's sometimes called, less developed countries in Africa. He went on to take aim at Britain, saying Brexit has led to an explosion of negative effects.
Yes, well, joining us from Paris is Telegraph journalist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. And thank you very much indeed for joining us. Macron's having a little moment here, isn't he? Fighting talk from Monsieur Macron. Why do you think he's saying all this?
Well, you say a little moment, but it was a 2-hour-long speech. Within that speech, I mean, the beginning was very structured, and that was what he'd written with his aides. And then he went basically off-piste, and he sort of rambled about many things. And one of the things he rambled about, but not by no means the other one, he's also insulted Germans and other people, was his view, as he would describe it, of France's relationship to Europe and other nations' part in Europe. And because he, at the same time, was talking about strategic autonomy and bringing together the French and the British in a military alliance and sort of reworking the Lancaster House Treaty, the result was a kind of mishmash in which he couldn't help himself from sort of mentioning, very clearly the Rwanda policies of Rishi Sunak and also mentioning Brexit as being an own goal and that sort of thing. But it was unfiltered Macron, and to a large extent, this is the kind of jokes that he will make, and this is the sort of thing that you recognize from his manners. But it was not especially aimed at belittling Britain. It was just part of the massive sort of rambling speech that he gave.
But to me, it just smacked of huge hypocrisy. He was talking about betraying European values of sort of tolerance and all the rest of it. This is a guy who's presided over a burqa ban, an anti-Israel demonstration ban, a public servant and school hijab ban, requiring mosques to sign up to some sort of values charter, and the prospect of deporting individuals from France while ignoring ECHR appeals. That's the Macron manifesto.
I would say the last one is a very good point. I'd say the other point, especially the hijab ban, and it's not just a ban on hijab and the headscarf. It is a ban on all religious signs in the schools and civil service of the country, and not in the streets, because in effect this is an offence to the neutrality of the state, which is guaranteed by the French Constitution. So that was perfectly valid. Many anti-Palestine demonstrations have not been forgiven. The ones that called for murder, then again, were breaking French law, and he forbade them. It's very different. But you can certainly make the argument that when France wants to flout the ECHR court, there's no way, he's got absolutely no problem doing that. It's the idea that people who come from different countries than Rwanda itself could be deported to a country which is not theirs. But, I mean, this is quibbling. This is also the general attitude that we know that voters would like actually less immigration, illegal immigration, and that was a kind of a sop to those voters.
The reason I give that list of policies, not all regarding immigration, of course, is if a British politician were to institute any one of them, they'd be called. They're well to the right of Nigel Farage.
He'll say laïcité, laïcité.
Well, we are a different country from Britain. We've always been. We're also different from Germany, where they have a church tax, which is levied by the state. We are different countries, and the idea that different nations have got different traditions within the European Union and within the European continent is actually not such a bad thing.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Thank you very much indeed. Very interesting. Yes, he would argue that a lot of those policies are protecting French values, protecting
and all about the
European
sort of
values.
Secularism that is integral to the post-revolutionary French mindset.
Yes, but he manages to ignore the ECHR. He manages to deport people he doesn't want in the country, doesn't he? But Britain's so bad for having a Rwanda scheme. Hang on a minute. How many countries in the European Union are currently looking at these types of agreements? They want to see if it works in this country, don't they? And then they'll follow suit, because a lot of people are saying that their new immigration pact isn't going to make the blindest bit of difference to the migration crisis in Europe. But there you go, Monsieur Macron telling us how how he feels.
Coming up, scientists are questioning the answer to that old age question, whether human beings are alone in the universe. Well, a new space telescope is about to point its lens to a distant planet. Why? Well, we'll tell you all about it after this.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
It has been truly the most extraordinary day in Brussels. Now, for me, this is nothing. In my last years here, I was barred from coffee bars, barred from restaurants, even barred from a pub I've been using for 20 years. But today, they brought that cancel culture, they brought that intolerance onto the world stage. And yet, when we come to the British Labour Party, this is what Jonathan Ashworth had to say earlier on today.
I think some of the speakers, from what I understand, who have been advertised on the website for this conference, have very unsavoury views. I'm rather surprised that Suella Braverman's been allowed to go and speak at this event.
And just to prove what the new Labour government will be like, he was backed up by rising star of the Labour movement, Wes Streeting.
And of course a source close to the Right Honourable Member for Fareham, who couldn't be here today with us, Mr Deputy Speaker, because she's currently in Brussels surrounded by the police who are trying to shut down the event she's attended with some far-right fanatics with whom she has much in common.
Even the Prime Minister of Belgium, which is not a country I've always had great relations with, said what happened at the Claridge, the name of the club today, is unacceptable. Let me tell you something. If at any point in the last 4 years I'd ever for one moment doubted Brexit, or at least doubted how it had been conducted by a Conservative government, what I saw today in Brussels absolutely confirmed to me that leaving this monstrous union, with its deep intolerance, with its refusal to accept that anybody else can have an alternative point of view, today proved to me that Brexit absolutely was the right thing to do.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's Friday, so we're talking about aliens. Could scientists be on the brink of discovering that we are indeed not alone in the universe?
We're joined now by space and planetary scientist Andy Lound. Now, Andy, I must say I'm always a little bit sceptical about the idea of alien life. I imagine those sort of ET-style aliens. But are we actually onto something here?
Good afternoon. Well, yes, I mean, you're right to be sceptical because that's good science. You've got to be sceptical about it. This is all due to observations that were made of a planet which goes by a very exciting name of K218b, which is going around a red dwarf star, which is quite a small star. It only takes 33 days to go around it. And as it passed in front of the star, the Webb telescope was able to take some spectroscopic analysis of the atmosphere, and then you find out what's in that atmosphere. Now, what was interesting, of all the things that were there was methane, carbon dioxide, but it also seemed to detect material called dimethyl sulfide. Now, what the exciting thing about that is dimethyl sulfide, as far as we know, can only be produced by living organisms, phytoplankton on the Earth. We had no other way naturally of forming this material. So that got people excited. The scientist who discovered it said he couldn't sleep because he was very excited about it. But it is a snapshot, and although I'm looking at the graph of it now, having a look at it, it is a trace and a possibility of it. People got so excited about it, they've got time on the Webb telescope to now have a good 8-hour look at this planet to do very, very fine analysis of this planet's atmosphere to see indeed if dimethyl sulfide is actually present in its atmosphere. Because there's a lot of arguments going on as to whether this planet could harbour life or not. Because of the nature of it, they think it's what's called a mini Neptune, because it's actually much larger than the Earth. It's 2.6 times the radius of the Earth. It's a lot more denser, and that suggests there's a hydrogen atmosphere there. But the argument is whether there's an ocean at the bottom there or not. And there's a lot of our scientists arguing about it. If it's gravitationally tied, which means that as the planet goes around its parent star, it shows only one side to it, that will change significantly the temperature variation on the planet. If it is rotating, then there's a different argument comes into play. So this experiment is to have a real close look at this planet and try to solve some of these mysterious questions and to find out whether indeed dimethyl sulfide is there.
All of these conversations about sort of which planets are where, how far away from their respective stars they are, if they're rotating or not, how big they are, it just makes me think how remarkably unlikely Earth was. We just so happened to be in the correct distance from the sun.
I thought you were going to say it makes me feel small and insignificant.
No,
of course
it
Tom
feels
would say
special. Just so incredibly special that the Earth just ticks every single one of these boxes, and so far we haven't been able to find a single planet really that fits the bill.
It's just you've made a very important point there, because from a scientific point of view, to get life to start, it needs a lot of things. For instance, if we didn't have a moon, that might have been significant in the formation of life on the Earth. If there was no moon, that may not have happened. To get carbon chemistry to start, you need the right temperature to start with, and you need the bipolar medium, which is liquid water. And this planet is in a right position for those temperatures to happen for that. So it's in a physically the right position, but you still need that material to be there in the first place. And that's going to be the big question, whether that is the case or not. This is going to be a very, very exciting 8 hours today as the Webb telescope gets the data. Then it has to be processed. And probably in 6 months' time, when people have analysed it carefully, the debate will begin, has to go to peer group review, and people have to analyse it. But it is quite fantastic, and if it turns out that it is right...
Andy, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to end it there because it is the end of the show. Andy Lamb, planetary scientist. You've been watching Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. That's it from us. Have a fabulous weekend, whatever you're up to. But it's Martin Dobney next, right after your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry for many of us through the rest of today, but there will be some heavy rain starting to arrive into the south. That's as this area of low pressure is arriving with these weather fronts. That's bringing the heavier rain we've seen across parts of Cornwall so far today, and that will continue to push northwards throughout this evening. So parts of Devon, Dorset, Cornwall, possibly South Wales will see some heavy outbreaks of rain through this evening, and then by tomorrow morning, a further batch will arrive into the southeast. Ahead of that, it's going to be quite a cloudy night for much of Wales and central areas of England, but to the north of this area, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, another clear and cold night. So we're likely to see a frost again in similar areas to where we saw this morning by Saturday morning. But there will be a lot of sunshine around once again across Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland, parts of Northern England as well. The best of sunshine will be in the morning on Saturday. The cloud will bubble up just as it has done today, and there is a risk of a few showers breaking out here and there, particularly at the coasts. For parts of Wales and central areas, it'll be quite cloudy and a cold feeling day. And into the southeast, we start to see some showery outbreaks of rain by the afternoon, and it will start to feel a bit warmer. Now, those showery outbreaks of rain become a large swathe of rain for Sunday, so more areas are going to see a wetter day on Sunday, particularly across eastern areas and across southern areas of England. Now, that rain will move out into the north.
It's the final week to see how you could win our biggest prize yet. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. Hurry, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from Thursday the 2nd of May,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis. And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we. We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from Thursday the 2nd of May at midnight on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's Channel.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you and a happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, and we're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, under fire, Humza Yousaf has been called a dead man walking after a no-confidence vote leaves his future hanging by a thread. After his first year from hell, can the SNP leader survive this nightmare week? Next up, as immigration to Ireland soars, their Deputy Prime Minister has bizarrely blamed the UK and even the Rwanda bill. But after another arson attack on an asylum hotel last night around about an hour from Dublin, an Irish political leader will tell GB News why the blame lies solely